Even the summer wind seemed to hold its breath, sensing the change before anyone else could. The sun is warm, baking the earth into a familiar, comforting crust. It is summer. The kind of summer that feels endless, stretching out across the vast, rolling steppe like a golden blanket woven from light and heat. Here, the world is measured not in hours or days, but in the slow, rhythmic turning of the seasons and the gentle, eternal flow of the great river. The Volga. It is a wide, shimmering ribbon of deep, cool blue cutting through the pale yellow earth. It is a lifeline of water and light, ancient and unbothered. On its winding banks, the grass grows thick and sweet, hiding the small, silver insects that hum through the lazy, sun-drenched afternoons. Small wooden docks jet out into the current, the gentle lapping of the water against the timber creating a soft, rhythmic lullaby. Little wooden boats bob at their moorings, their peeling paint warm to the touch. In the shade of the weeping willows that trail their long, green fingers in the water, grandmothers sit in quiet companionship. They mend fishing nets or peel potatoes, their hands moving with the practiced ease of a lifetime, their soft voices mingling with the rustle of the leaves. Inland from the water, the world transforms into a sea of grain. The fields stretch out to the very edge of the horizon, millions of slender stalks crowned with heavy, golden heads. When the breeze comes, it moves across the fields like an ocean wave. A ripple in the wheat. It rises and falls in a beautiful, hypnotic dance, bringing temporary relief to the men and women working the dark soil. Their hands are calloused, brown from the sun, intimately familiar with the weight and the smell of the earth. They rest in the sparse shade of lonely, silver-barked birch trees, drinking cool water from metal canteens. They speak in low, comfortable murmurs. They talk of the harvest that will soon begin. They talk of upcoming marriages, of children growing too fast, of the heavy rain they hope will come to cool the evening air. They do not yet talk of the horizon. But the horizon is changing. It is not a sudden, violent storm. It is something quieter, something more insidious. A strange, persistent haze is settling precisely where the flat earth meets the pale sky in the west. At first, it is easily mistaken for the summer heat, shimmering and bending the light off the dry, dirt roads. But the older men, sitting on their wooden porches in the late afternoon with unlit pipes resting in their laps, watch it with narrowing eyes. They have seen many things in their long lives. They know the subtle differences in the air. They know the difference between the pale dust kicked up by a solitary farmer's cart and the dark, bruised dust of something massive, something terrible, crawling slowly across the curvature of the earth. The first true sign does not come from the sky, but from the quiet dirt path leading into the village. The mail arrives, carried by a postman whose footsteps seem to grow a little heavier with each passing week. The leather strap of his satchel cuts into his shoulder, but the true weight is in the letters he carries. He hands over the small, pale envelopes with a gentle nod, meeting the eyes of the mothers and wives just a fraction of a second longer than usual, a silent, shared acknowledgement of fear. Inside the small, whitewashed homes, these letters are opened with trembling, flour-dusted hands. The handwriting is deeply familiar, a comfort in itself, the loops and slants bringing the ghost of a loved one into the quiet room. But the words on the thin paper are strained. They speak of distant places, of endless marching, of a deep, bone-aching fatigue. They say, "I am well, do not worry," but the paper feels heavy with all the things left unsaid. A woman sits by her open window, the afternoon light catching the stray hairs that have escaped her braided hair. She reads the letter once, twice, and then folds it carefully, pressing it flat against her chest. She closes her eyes, listening to her own heartbeat in the silent room, wondering where the author of those words is sleeping tonight, wondering if he is looking at the same sun. As July deepens, the evenings begin to lose their carefree lightness. The laughter of the children playing in the dusty streets is hushed, and they are called inside to wash up a little earlier than before. The village dogs seem restless. They pace by the wooden fences, lifting their noses to sniff a wind that carries the very faintest scent of exhausted earth and hot metal, a harsh tang cutting cleanly through the sweet fragrance of the blooming sunflowers. At night, lying in their beds beneath heavy, quilted blankets, families listen to the silence. But it is no longer a pure, unbroken silence. Beneath the familiar chirping of the crickets, beneath the soft rustle of the birch leaves scratching against the window panes, there is a vibration. A low, rhythmic thrumming at the edge of hearing. It is too far away to truly hear with the ears, it is felt instead in the bones, in the wooden floorboards, and the very foundations of their homes. It is the murmur of the approaching storm, a physical pressure in the atmosphere that makes sleep elusive and fragile. The realization does not arrive with a dramatic shout or a sudden panic in the town square. It arrives with a whisper. It is a quiet, heartbreaking understanding that passes between neighbors over backyard fences, spoken softly while hanging damp laundry on the line. We cannot stay. The words hang in the still, warm air, heavy and undeniable. It is a terrible, unnatural thing to look at the home that has sheltered you, to look at the walls that have absorbed your laughter, your quiet tears, your arguments, and your celebrations, and know that you must walk away. There is no chaos, only a profound, sorrowful quiet that blankets the community like an early frost. And so, the gentle, heartbreaking process of packing begins. How do you gather an entire life into a single bundle? What do you choose to carry when you can only carry what your own tired arms can bear? In the dim, blue light of early morning, before the sun has fully crested the horizon, a mother kneels before a heavy wooden trunk at the foot of her bed. The iron hinges creak, a sound she has known since she was a little girl playing hide and seek. Inside lies the woven fabric of their family's history. She slowly bypasses the heavy winter coats, knowing they will be needed, but too heavy to carry. She ignores the nice porcelain dishes they use only on holidays. Her hands reach instead for the small, irreplaceable things. A simple silver spoon given to her on her wedding day. A small, framed photograph of her own parents, the edges curled and soft with age, their unsmiling faces looking back at her across the years. She wraps these treasures delicately in a thick, woolen shawl, her tears falling silently onto the fabric, leaving small, dark circles. In another room, across the village, a young boy watches his father. The man moves slowly, methodically, his face set in a mask of stoic calm. He packs a coarse canvas sack with a small bag of flour, a glass jar of salted vegetables, a tightly wrapped parcel of dried meat, and a loaf of heavy, dark bread. The barest essentials of survival. But then, when he thinks his son is looking away, the father slips a small, hand-carved wooden horse into the very bottom of the sack. A simple toy. A piece of the boy's childhood, preserved against the coming dark. It is a tiny, silent rebellion against the stripping away of their lives. An act of profound, quiet love hidden beneath layers of flour and salt. There is a strange, beautiful human instinct that takes hold in these final hours, the desire to leave order behind when stepping into the unknown. The houses are left immaculate. Women sweep the wooden floors one last time, the stiff straw brooms making a soft, shushing sound in the empty, echoing rooms. They wipe down the wooden tables until they gleam. They meticulously pour fresh water into the terracotta pots of geraniums sitting brightly on the windowsills. It is a desperate, silent prayer that the flowers will survive, that someone will be there to see them bloom in the coming weeks. When they finally step outside, they do not lock the doors. To turn the key and hear the heavy click of the lock would be to admit defeat. It would be an admission that they are never coming back. Leaving the door unlatched is a promise. A whispered vow to the empty rooms that they will return. Stepping out into the sunlight feels entirely different now. The golden warmth that was once a deep comfort now feels harsh and indifferent, a glaring, unblinking eye watching them slowly assemble on the dirt roads. They become a slow-moving procession of the displaced. Small, creaking wooden carts are loaded with whatever they could manage to tie down. Old women, wrapped in dark shawls despite the summer heat, are seated atop piles of bedding, their faces carved with a quiet, ancient resignation. Young children walk quietly, their small hands gripping tightly to their mother's skirts, their eyes wide and solemn, sensing the deep gravity of the morning even if they cannot understand the reasons why. Before the dirt road turns, bending away from the familiar curve of the river and stretching out toward the vast, unknown east, the procession pauses. As if guided by a single, shared thought, the people stop. They turn around. They look back. They look at the slanted rooftops of their homes, baking quietly in the midday sun. They look at the tall, yellow sunflowers nodding heavily by the wooden garden gates, their bright faces turned toward the light. They look at the river, still deeply blue, still flowing, eternally unconcerned with the fragile, fleeting lives lived upon its banks. The air is perfectly still. The only movement in the entire world is the gentle wind sweeping across the vast, golden fields of grain. A ripple in the wheat. It rises and falls, a beautiful, haunting wave of gold, waving a slow, silent goodbye to the hands that planted it. They hold the image in their minds, burning the memory of the light, the water, and the quiet earth into their hearts. Then, slowly, they turn their faces forward. The soft dust rises beneath their tired shoes, a pale cloud that marks their slow progress away from the sun. The murmurs on the horizon are growing just a little louder now, a vibration that travels through the soles of their feet. The shadow in the west is creeping just a little closer, swallowing the edge of the sky. But for now, they walk together. They are a quiet river of humanity flowing across the immense, endless steppe, carrying the fragile memories of a peaceful summer in the small, tightly tied bundles held closely to their chests, walking softly into the gathering dusk. To walk across the edge of the world is to learn the true weight of the sky. Out here, on the vast and baking steppe, the earth does not simply roll, it stretches, pulling itself thin and flat until it meets the heavens in a blurred, shimmering line. It is an ocean of dry, yellow grass and pale dirt, so impossibly wide that a man can walk from the moment the sun breaks the horizon until it sinks back into the dark, and feel as though he has not moved at all. There are no forests here to offer a canopy of green. There are no tall hills to break the relentless wind. There is only the sky, a brilliant, blinding blue, and the endless, aching expanse of the land beneath it. Across this vast emptiness, a slow, winding river of men is moving. You can hear them long before you can see their faces. It is a sound that becomes a rhythm, and a rhythm that becomes a state of mind. The soft, rhythmic crunch of boots against dry earth. Thousands of footfalls, rising and falling in a hypnotic, unceasing cadence. It is a low, sweeping whisper against the soil. Shuff, crunch. Shuff, crunch. It is the sound of an entire world in motion, dragging itself forward, step by weary step. In the overwhelming heat of the afternoon, this sound becomes a lullaby, a repetitive drone that lulls the mind into a quiet, waking dream, buffering the consciousness against the sheer exhaustion of the body. With every step, the powdery earth rises. It does not billow in great clouds, but rather lifts in a fine, persistent mist that hangs in the still air around them. This dust is the great equalizer. It settles over the shoulders of their tunics, masking the colors of their uniforms. It paints their eyelashes and their eyebrows in shades of pale ghost gray. It fills the deep creases around tired eyes and dusts the stubble on their cheeks. It strips away where they came from, erasing the borders of their distant homes, and turns them simply into men of the earth, wandering through a hazy, sunlit dream. They have come from so far away. If you were to walk alongside them and listen to their quiet murmurs, you would hear the echoes of places that feel like they belong to another lifetime entirely. You would hear the lilting accents of men who grew up in the shadows of great, snow-capped mountains, men who are used to the smell of pine needles and cold, rushing streams. You would hear the voices of boys from green, rolling valleys, where the morning dew hangs heavy on the ferns and the rain makes the cobblestones shine. Now, those memories of cool dampness seem like a mirage. Here, there is only the sun, pressing down like a heavy, golden hand against their shoulders. The heat is a physical presence. It bakes the leather of their heavy boots and warms the metal clasps of their gear until they are almost too hot to touch. Inside their wool and cotton layers, the men sweat, and the dust clings to the dampness, baking into a thin, tight crust against their skin. Their lips are cracked, tasting of salt and dry dirt. It is in this profound discomfort that the smallest, most beautiful moments of humanity emerge. Down the marching line, a man stumbles, his boot catching on a hardened rut in the road. He does not fall, but his head drops, his shoulders sagging beneath the invisible weight of the miles. The man beside him, a stranger only weeks ago, now a brother bound by the dust, does not say a word. He simply reaches out, his hand wrapping firmly around the stumbling man's elbow, steadying him. It is a fleeting touch, lasting only a second, but it carries the weight of a profound promise. I am here. I will hold you up. Then comes the quiet ceremony of the water. Canteens are precious things out here on the baked earth. When a man reaches to his hip and unscrews the small metal cap, the sound is intimately familiar to everyone around him. He raises it to his lips, his eyes closing as the tepid, metallic-tasting water wets his parched throat. He does not drink deeply. He cannot. He takes only enough to chase away the dryness, to allow himself to swallow. And then, he lowers the flask. He looks at the boy walking next to him, a young man whose eyes are glazed with the heat, staring blankly ahead. The older man wipes the mouth of the canteen with his dusty sleeve and holds it out. There are no grand declarations of sacrifice. There is only a quiet nod, a tired shifting of the eyes. The boy takes the canteen, his dirty fingers brushing against the older man's hand. He drinks, carefully, reverently, leaving just a few drops at the bottom. When he hands it back, their eyes meet. In that silent exchange, everything is understood. They are sharing more than water. They are sharing their very survival, pouring their own strength into the hollows of another man's exhaustion. Eventually, the command to halt rolls down the line, a distant echo passed from mouth to mouth. The relief is immediate and overwhelming. Men do not sit, they simply collapse. They drop their heavy packs into the dust and sink down beside them, folding their legs, letting the earth hold them. They seek out the smallest fragments of shade, the shadow cast by a broken cartwheel, the narrow sliver of dark beside a comrade slumped back. They pull off their heavy helmets, letting the hot breeze ruffle hair matted with sweat and dirt. This is the sacred time. This is when the mind is allowed to travel, even if the body cannot. From deep inside a breast pocket, secured behind a button and pressed safely against a beating heart, a soldier withdraws a small, folded piece of paper. His hands are thick, calloused, and stained with the grease of his rifle and the dirt of the road, but he handles the paper with the delicacy of a man holding a fragile pane of glass. It has been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases have worn paper thin, soft as old cloth. He leans back against his pack, ignoring the noise of the resting men around him, and opens it. The scent of the paper is almost entirely gone, replaced by the smell of his own sweat and tobacco, but in his mind, he can still smell her. He can smell the faint, clean scent of soap in the lavender bushes that grew by their back door. He reads the words, though he has already memorized every loop and line of the ink. The writing is hurried, sloping slightly downward, speaking of things so beautifully ordinary that they make his chest ache. She writes that the tomatoes in the garden are finally turning red. She writes that the dog still waits by the front gate at the time he used to come home from work. She writes that their little girl has learned a new song and sings it to her dolls in the evening. There is no mention of the vast steppe. There is no mention of the heat or the dust. It is a piece of a different universe, folded up and carried across the world. For these 10 minutes, while the sun beats down on his dusty boots, he is not a soldier marching toward the edge of the east. He is a husband, sitting in a wooden chair in his own kitchen, listening to a child sing. He runs his rough thumb over her signature, tracing the letters, trying to feel the warmth of the hand that held the pen. He closes his eyes, breathing slowly, letting the phantom comfort of his home settle over his tired bones like a soft, heavy blanket. Nearby, another man is looking at a photograph. It is a small square, dog-eared and smudged. It shows an older woman with a kind, lined face, standing on a porch with her hands folded in her apron. The man looking at it is young, barely out of his teenage years. He stares at the picture, his lips moving silently, whispering words that only he and the photograph can hear. He is apologizing for leaving. He is promising to come back. He holds the small square of paper so tightly that his knuckles turn white, drawing strength from the steady, unwavering gaze of the mother trapped in the frame. All across the resting line, these quiet, private resurrections are taking place. Pieces of paper, small tokens, a smooth stone from a hometown river, a silver coin given for luck. They are anchors. In a world that has been reduced to an endless sea of yellow grass and the monotonous rhythm of walking, these small objects tether the men to their humanity. They remind them that they have names, that they are loved, that they belong to someone, somewhere, far beyond this baking horizon. But the rest cannot last forever. The shadows begin to stretch, growing long and thin across the dirt, pointing eastward like dark fingers. The command is given, soft but firm, passing down the line. Slowly, painfully, the men begin to rise. Joints pop, muscles scream in quiet protest against the movement. They brush the loose dirt from their trousers, a futile gesture, and hoist their heavy packs back onto their sore shoulders. They fold the fragile letters, tucking their homes back into their pockets, sealing them away behind buttons and canvas. They adjust their straps. They pick up their gear. They take a collective breath, filling their lungs with the warm, dusty air. And the footfalls begin again. Shuff, crunch. Shuff, crunch. The rhythm returns, picking up exactly where it left off, a steady heartbeat vibrating through the crust of the earth. But as they walk now, the light is changing. The harsh, blinding gold of the afternoon is softening, melting into a deep, bruised orange that bleeds across the sky. The heat begins to lift, replaced by a cool, gentle breeze that sweeps across the sea of grass, bringing a momentary relief to their flushed faces. They look forward. For days, there has been nothing but the straight line of the horizon, flat and unbroken. But now, in the fading light, something is changing. Far in the distance, where the bruised sky meets the darkening earth, the flat line is interrupted. A silhouette is rising from the ground. It is hazy at first, distorted by the miles of air between them, looking like a jagged smudge of charcoal against the sunset. It does not look like a place of terror. It does not look like a storm. From this distance, wrapped in the quiet twilight, it looks almost peaceful. It looks like a city asleep, its tall chimneys and blocky buildings forming a quiet, motionless jagged edge against the heavens. The men do not speak as they watch it slowly materialize out of the dust. They simply keep walking. Their weary eyes remain fixed on the shape, wondering what waits for them in the shadows of those distant walls. The stars begin to prick through the fading orange sky, tiny pinpricks of silver light. They are the same stars that are shining over the green valleys, the same stars shining over the gardens with ripening tomatoes. Under this vast, shared canopy, the quiet river of men flows onward, their slow, heavy footfalls disappearing into the gathering dusk, walking softly toward the silhouette at the edge of the world. There is a particular kind of stillness that falls over a city just before the light begins to fade. It is late August, and the afternoon sun has spent the day warming the wide, paved avenues and the pale stone of the apartment buildings. The heat lingers in the bricks, radiating a soft, comfortable warmth as the shadows slowly begin to stretch across the parks. In this golden hour, the city breathes a long, collective sigh. It is a beautiful, sprawling place, perched on the edge of the great river, humming with the gentle, everyday rhythms of a million lives intertwining. If you close your eyes and listen, you can hear the beautiful, chaotic symphony of the evening. There is the rhythmic clatter of the streetcars, a metallic hum that traces the spine of the city. There is the sound of water splashing from public fountains, where children with scraped knees and sunbrowned faces chase each other through the spray, their laughter bright and sharp in the warm air. On the balconies that overlook the quiet courtyards, grandmothers lean against iron railings, shaking out colorful woven rugs, watching the world go by with knowing, tired eyes. Inside the apartments, the evening rituals have begun. A woman stands in her small kitchen, the window pushed wide open to catch the faint breeze rolling off the Volga. She slices a loaf of heavy, dark bread, the knife making a soft, rhythmic thud against the scarred wooden board. The smell of boiling potatoes and dill fills the small space. On the table, a chipped porcelain teapot waits, holding the promise of a quiet moment at the end of a long day. A father returns from the factory, his hands rough and stained with grease, gently removing his cap and letting out a soft sigh as he finally sits in his favorite, worn armchair. It is a world of comforting routines. It is a world where the biggest concern of the evening is whether the tea will stay hot, or if the children will come inside before the street lamps flicker to life. But there is a new sound gathering on the horizon. It does not begin as a roar. It begins as a vibration, a low, barely perceptible thrumming at the very edge of the sky. It sounds like a distant swarm of bees, an endless, monotonous drone that seems to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Down in the streets, people pause. The woman in the kitchen stops slicing the bread, the knife hovering in the air. The old men in the park look up from their wooden chessboards, their weathered hands still resting on the carved pieces. The children stop their running, looking toward the west with wide, curious eyes. The distant hum grows deeper, heavier. It is a sound that vibrates in the teeth, a heavy pressure that presses against the chest. The golden light of the evening begins to change. The sun is not setting, but the sky is darkening. A vast, mechanical shadow is pulling itself across the heavens, eclipsing the soft apricot clouds. There is no sudden panic. There is only a surreal, waking dream as the reality of the sound takes hold. The air grows thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and impending dust. The gentle symphony of the city, the streetcars, the laughter, the splashing water, is swallowed whole by the overwhelming, singular drone of the sky. And then, the world fractures. The earth shudders, a deep, resonant groan that travels up through the soles of the shoes. The sky, just moments ago a canvas of peaceful twilight, turns to cinders. It is as if the stars themselves have caught fire and are tumbling down onto the rooftops. The descent into the earth begins. It is a quiet, shuffling migration away from the falling fire. Doors are left open. The teapot is left to cool on the table. The wooden chess pieces are abandoned on their checkered board. Families gather whatever is closest to their hands, a thick woolen blanket, a small satchel of papers, a child's rag doll with mismatched button eyes. They move down the narrow, concrete stairwells, their hands trailing along the cool, rough walls, stepping away from the sky and plunging into the dark beneath the city. In the deep cellars and the vaulted basements, the air is completely different. It smells of damp earth, of old wood, and the faint, sweet scent of stored root vegetables. But tonight, it quickly fills with the smell of fearful sweat and the sharp tang of struck matches. The darkness is absolute until a single, trembling flame sparks to life. An older man, his hands shaking slightly, lights a small, wax candle. He sets it on a wooden crate in the center of the room. The soft, golden light pushes weakly against the shadows, revealing a tapestry of faces huddled together. Neighbors who had previously only exchanged polite nods in the stairwell are now pressed shoulder to shoulder, their breaths mingling in the tight space. Above them, the sky is tearing itself apart. The ceiling vibrates with a terrifying rhythm. Thud. 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 Every impact sends a shower of fine, gray dust drifting down from the wooden joists, falling like a strange, warm snow over their hair and their shoulders. The walls groan, shifting under the immense pressure of the changed world above. It is here, in this suffocating dark, beneath the weight of a shattered city, that the most profound quiet strength is born. In the corner, away from the flickering candle, a young mother sits on the cold earthen floor. She has her knees pulled up, creating a small, safe harbor for the little boy tucked into her lap. He is trembling, his face buried deep into the rough wool of her sweater. He is too terrified to cry, his small hands clutching the fabric until his knuckles are white. She rests her chin on the top of his head, smelling the familiar, sweet scent of his hair through the falling dust. She knows she cannot stop the earth from shaking. She knows she cannot reach up and silence the terrifying roar of the sky. But she can build a wall of sound around him. She takes a slow, deep breath, filling her lungs with the dusty air, and she begins to sing. It is a lullaby, old and worn, a melody that her own mother sang to her when the winter winds howled outside their window long ago. Her voice is barely a whisper at first, trembling like the candle flame. Hush now, the stars are sleeping. She strokes his back, her hand moving in a slow, rhythmic circle, matching the cadence of her song. The river flows, the night is deep. Her voice finds its footing. It does not try to compete with the monstrous thudding above. It weaves beneath it, a delicate, silver thread of humanity slipping through the heavy, iron noise of the world. It is a soothing, mesmerizing sound. The other people in the cellar hear it. The old man watches the candle wax drip, his eyes softening as the melody reaches him. A young woman, holding tightly to a framed photograph of her husband, closes her eyes and lets the lullaby wash over her, imagining that he can hear it too, wherever he is on the vast, dark steppe. The crying of another child in the back of the room slowly quiets, replaced by the rhythmic breathing of a heavy, exhausted sleep. For a little while, the cellar is no longer a tomb of fear. It becomes a sanctuary, held together by the fragile architecture of a mother's voice. They share this invisible warmth. When the candle gutters and threatens to go out, another hand reaches forward from the dark to shield the flame. When the young girl drops her rag doll, a rough, calloused hand picks it up, brushing the dirt from its yarn hair before gently handing it back to her with a soft, reassuring smile. They do not speak of the future. They do not speak of what their homes will look like when the sun rises. They simply exist in the present moment, anchored to one another by the shared beating of their hearts. They pass a single, small canteen of water around the circle, each person taking only a sip, ensuring there is enough for the person beside them. A grandmother reaches into her pocket and pulls out a solitary, wrapped candy, pressing it silently into the hand of the boy sitting next to her. These are the small, quiet rebellions against the dark. These are the everyday heroics of a people who refuse to let their humanity be pulverized. Hours bleed into one another. Time loses its meaning down here in the deep earth. The roaring above eventually shifts. It no longer sounds like a continuous, tearing fabric, but rather a sporadic, distant thunder rolling away into the deep night. The violent shaking of the floorboard softens into a low, dull ache. The air in the cellar has grown stale and heavy, thick with dust and the smoke of the burnt-out candle. Slowly, carefully, a man stands up. He brushes the thick layer of gray dust from his trousers and walks toward the heavy wooden door that leads to the stairs. The iron handle is cold beneath his hand. He pulls it open just a fraction. The air that rushes down into the cellar is no longer the sweet, linden-scented breeze of the August afternoon. It is hot, carrying the harsh, chemical scent of burning timber, scorched brick, and melted glass. They slowly make their way up the stairs, a silent procession emerging from the underworld. When they reach the street level, they step out into a landscape that defies comprehension. The bustling city of white stone and leafy parks has been erased. In its place is a jagged, skeletal forest of ruined walls and shattered glass. But it is the sky that holds their gaze. The stars are gone, swallowed by a thick, swirling canopy of smoke. The night is not black, but a deep, bruised orange, illuminated by 1,000 separate fires burning across the horizon. The river, the great, ancient Volga, reflects this terrible light, looking like a ribbon of molten copper flowing slowly through the ruins. And from the swirling orange clouds above, something is falling. It is not snow. It is a gentle, drifting rain of cinders. Soft, glowing embers float down through the silent air, turning the dark streets into a strange, tragic wonderland. The cinders brush against their faces, warm and light, before turning to gray ash upon the pavement. They stand together in the rubble, a quiet cluster of survivors wrapped in dusty blankets and shawls. They do not scream. They do not weep wildly. The shock is too profound, the transformation of their world too absolute. They simply stand in the warm, falling ash, holding onto each other's hands. A mother pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders, looking at the glowing skeleton of the building where her apartment used to be. She thinks of the chipped porcelain teapot, the wooden table, the loaf of bread left half-sliced. It is all gone, turned to smoke in memory. But then she looks down at the child standing beside her, his small hand gripping hers with an unbreakable strength. She feels the steady rise and fall of his chest. She feels the warmth of his skin. The city of stone has been broken. The sky has turned to cinders. But down in the dark, beneath the ruined earth, they kept each other warm. The fire rained from above, but the quiet, beautiful flame of their shared humanity never went out. It still burns, small and defiant, as they stand together in the orange light, watching the ashes fall softly onto the changed world, waiting for the morning to come. When the sky was finally swallowed by the ashes, the city simply folded itself into the earth. Up above, the world of light had become a harsh, unfamiliar place. The sun, which had baked the golden wheat fields only weeks before, was now nothing more than a pale, ghostly disk hiding behind a thick, permanent curtain of soot and powdered brick. The broad, tree-lined avenues and the familiar, comforting silhouettes of the apartment blocks had been reduced to jagged teeth reaching up into a bruised and angry heaven. And so, the people did what all living things do when the winter of the world arrives too early. They sought the deep, quiet warmth of the soil. They migrated downward, leaving the surface to the wind and the smoke, and began a new life in the shadowed catacombs beneath the streets. It is a profound and mysterious thing to live without the sky. Down in the vaulted basements, the deep earthen cellars, and the cavernous, echoing spaces of the old sewer lines, the rigid rules of day and night simply melted away. Time was no longer measured by the rising and setting of the sun, or by the chiming of the clock tower in the square. Time was measured by the rhythmic, collective breathing of the people gathered in the dark. It was measured by the slow, inevitable melting of a wax candle and the gentle, comforting intervals of a whispered conversation. This new, subterranean city was built not of stone and mortar, but of shadows and heavy woolen blankets. Families who had once lived in spacious, airy rooms with large glass windows now found themselves claiming small, precious corners of damp earth. They hung tapestries and bedsheets from rusted iron pipes and exposed wooden joists, creating fragile, swaying walls to separate one family from the next. Yet, within these makeshift fabric rooms, a beautiful and stubborn dignity remained. A mother would kneel on the hard, packed dirt floor, using a bundle of dry twigs to sweep away the loose dust, keeping her small sanctuary as pristine as she once kept her parlor. A wooden crate, salvaged from a ruined grocer above, was placed in the center of the space, covered carefully with a piece of lace rescued from a hope chest. It became a dining table, a center of gravity around which their new world orbited. In this inverted city, the currency of life shifted. Gold and paper money meant absolutely nothing in the damp, cool air of the basements. Wealth was measured in much simpler, far more vital things. A full canteen of clean water was a treasure beyond calculation. A tin of preserved fruit was a miracle to be guarded and shared with reverence. But the most precious commodity of all, the thing that drew people together like moths in the endless night, was light. When a match was struck, the sound, a sharp, sudden hiss and a tiny flare of sulfur, commanded the attention of the entire room. Heads would turn from the shadows. eyes, wide and weary, would fixate on the tiny, trembling flame. If someone possessed a candle stub, lighting it was a quiet, sacred ritual. An older man, his hands caked in the gray dust of the city, would carefully set the small, white cylinder onto a tin plate. He would cup his hands around the wick, shielding it from the drafts that sighed through the subterranean tunnels, and touch the flame to the string. As the golden aura blossomed, it pushed back the heavy darkness, creating a warm, glowing sphere of safety in the center of the cavern. In this soft, forgiving light, the dirt and the exhaustion seemed to vanish. The harsh angles of hunger and fear were smoothed away. The candlelight caught the amber depths of a neighbor's eyes, the silver streaks in a grandmother's hair, the soft, round cheek of a sleeping infant. It made them all look like figures in a beautiful, ancient painting. Neighbors who had lived in the same building for years, who had previously shared nothing more than polite nods in the sunlit stairwells of the past, now sat shoulder to shoulder in the golden halo of the melting wax. The artificial boundaries of their former lives were gone. There were no foremen and laborers, no wealthy merchants and poor students down here. The darkness had stripped away every label, leaving only fragile, enduring human beings clinging to the warmth of one another. Because loud voices felt wrong in the heavy, echoing spaces beneath the earth, everything was spoken in whispers. The basements hummed with the sound of 100 soft conversations, a continuous, soothing murmur that wove together like a heavy, comforting quilt. They shared quiet stories of the world before. A woman would close her eyes, leaning her head against the cool, damp brick behind her, and describe the exact shade of blue the Volga turned in the early spring. She spoke of the way the ice would crack and sing as it flowed toward the sea. The people listening would nod slowly, visualizing the bright water, letting the memory cool their parched throats. A man would whisper about the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, describing the flour dusting the baker's apron, the crunch of the crust, until everyone in the circle could almost taste the phantom warmth on their tongues. In the dim light, profound acts of everyday heroism unfolded without fanfare or expectation of reward. An old woman, her hands trembling with age and fatigue, would carefully break her meager ration of hard, dark bread into 2 uneven pieces. She would look at the young soldier resting against the opposite wall, a boy no older than her own grandson, his uniform torn, his eyes vacant with exhaustion. Without a word, she would slide the larger piece of bread across the dusty floor toward him. He would look at her, a silent well of gratitude opening in his tired eyes, and she would simply offer a small, gentle nod. "Eat," the nod said. Live. Down in the deepest cellars, where the distant, muffled thudding of the world above sounded only like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping giant, the children adapted with a heartbreaking grace. They did not understand the grand, terrible movements of history taking place above their heads. They only knew the boundaries of their shadowy playground. They invented games in the dust. A boy and a girl sat cross-legged near a flickering lantern, playing a quiet game of checkers using bits of shattered white plaster and dark, broken charcoal they had gathered from the debris. Their small fingers moved the pieces with intense concentration, their soft giggles echoing beautifully in the cavernous space. A mother watched them from the shadows, her heart aching with a mixture of profound sorrow and fierce, overwhelming love. She reached out, running a hand over her daughter's tangled hair, carefully picking out a small piece of loose mortar, smoothing the strands with infinite tenderness. As long as she could touch her child, as long as she could hear that quiet laughter, the world had not completely ended. Sometimes, a visitor would arrive from the surface. A postman, his uniform gray with ash, or a runner, breathing heavily, would slip through the heavy cellar door, bringing a rush of cold, smoky air with him. He would carry a small canvas bag, and the sight of it would make the entire basement fall completely, breathlessly silent. He would pull a single, folded piece of paper from the bag. A letter. Because light was so scarce, he would move to the center of the room, kneeling beside the solitary candle. The owner of the letter, perhaps a young woman whose hands shook so violently she could not hold the paper herself, would ask him to read it aloud. The courier would clear his throat, his voice a low, soothing baritone in the damp dark. He would read the words slowly, treating each syllable with the utmost respect. The letter might be from a village far away, a place untouched by the fire. He read of mundane, beautiful things. "The harvest is going well this year," he read, the words hanging in the stillness. "The apple trees in the back garden are heavy with fruit. The dog had puppies, 3 brown and 1 black. We are saving the black one for you." As he spoke, the dark, earthen walls of the cellar seemed to melt away. The people huddled in the shadows closed their eyes and let the words transport them. They could see the green of the apple orchard. They could smell the sweet, fermenting fruit on the ground. They could feel the soft, warm fur of a puppy against their palms. For a few miraculous minutes, the war ceased to exist. They were carried away on the gentle current of a stranger's handwriting, finding refuge in the quiet, peaceful ordinary of a distant home. When the letter was finished, the courier folded it carefully and handed it to the weeping young woman, who pressed it against her heart as if it were a shield. A collective, soft sigh rippled through the basement. A shared moment of profound relief and shared sorrow. As the hours stretched on, the whispered conversations would slowly die down. The heavy blanket of fatigue would settle over the subterranean city. The candle stub, having given all of its golden light to the dark, would finally sputter and drown in its own wax, leaving the room in absolute, pitch blackness. But it was not a frightening dark. It was a holding dark. Wrapped in their coats and ragged blankets, families pulled close to one another, sharing the precious warmth of their bodies. A husband wrapped his arm protectively around his wife's waist. A grandfather curled his body around his sleeping grandchildren, serving as a human wall against the chill of the damp earth. They lay still, listening to the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the hundreds of souls sharing the cavern. In the absolute dark, you could not see the ruins above. You could not see the dirt on your hands or the weariness in your neighbor's face. There was only the feeling of a hand holding yours, the steady, reassuring rise and fall of a chest pressed against your back. The earth, which had been turned into a weapon above, was a mother below. She held them in her cool, quiet embrace, sheltering them deep within her roots. The thunder rolled far above their heads, a muffled, distant storm that could not reach them here. They closed their tired eyes, letting the gentle, swaying rhythm of the dark rock them into a deep, dreamless sleep, clinging to the quiet, unbreakable bonds of their shared humanity, safe and together, in the city beneath the earth. There is a place where the air itself seems to be made of memory, drifting like a pale, unmelting snow. Imagine a fortress not built of dark stone or iron, but a towering cathedral of concrete, raised high above the earth to hold the harvest. This is the Great Grain Elevator. From the outside, it is a colossal, silent giant, a landmark visible for miles across the sprawling, ruined city. But inside, it is an entirely different world. It is a secret, enclosed universe where the violent noise of the world outside is swallowed by walls so impossibly thick that the war becomes nothing more than a dull, distant ache, like a thunderstorm rolling away behind the mountains. When you step into the vast, echoing chambers of the elevator, the first thing you notice is the light. The thick concrete shell has been pierced, and through these narrow, jagged fissures, the afternoon sun pushes its way inside. The light does not just illuminate the space, it becomes a physical thing. It forms wide, golden pillars that stretch from the high, vaulted ceilings down to the debris-covered floor. And caught within these beams of light are millions upon millions of tiny, dancing motes. It is flour. The fine, crushed dust of a million golden wheat stalks, suspended in the still air. The air is thick with it. It hangs like a gentle fog, softening every edge, blurring every harsh line. It smells deeply, profoundly of the earth. It is the warm, comforting scent of roasted grain, of old wooden mills, and of bakeries in the quiet hours of the early morning. It is a scent that immediately bypasses the exhaustion of the mind and speaks directly to the soul, whispering of peace, of sustenance, and of home. In the deep shadows, just beyond the reach of the golden pillars of light, sit the men. They do not look like soldiers anymore. The flour has settled over them, a gentle, ghostly dusting that has erased the harsh olive and gray of their uniforms. It rests upon their shoulders like a soft mantle. It coats their eyelashes, their eyebrows, the stubble on their sunken cheeks. They sit incredibly still, looking like ancient, pale statues carved from chalk, or like ghosts who have gathered quietly in the belly of this great concrete beast to rest. The exhaustion they carry is not simply a physical tiredness, it is a profound, heavy weight that pulls at the very marrow of their bones. It is the kind of weariness that makes the simple act of blinking feel like a monumental effort. They sit with their backs pressed against the cool, curved concrete walls, their long legs stretched out in front of them, their hands resting loosely in their laps. There is no frantic movement here. There is no shouting. There is only the slow, rhythmic sound of deep, measured breathing, a quiet chorus of lungs drawing in the dust of the harvest. Time does not move inside the elevator. The clock stopped ticking long ago, their glass faces shattered and their gears frozen. Without the sun to track across the sky, without the clear transition of day into night, the hours simply melt into one another, forming a long, continuous twilight. It is a space of waiting. A beautiful, haunting pause between the heartbeats of the world. In this quiet suspension, the mind begins to wander, carried away on the scent of the crushed grain. Look closely at the man sitting near the base of a towering, empty silo. His hands are large, the knuckles thick and scarred, the skin withered by years of sun and wind. Before he carried a heavy iron rifle, these hands guided a wooden plow through the dark, rich soil of the steppe. He is a farmer. He knows the earth in a way that goes beyond words. He knows it by touch, by smell, by the instinct of his blood. He slowly reaches out, his fingers brushing against a torn canvas sack. A small pile of spilled wheat rests on the concrete floor. He scoops a handful of the golden grains into his palm. He brings his hand close to his face, letting the dim light catch the smooth, hard surface of the seeds. He closes his tired eyes and takes a slow, deep breath. He is no longer sitting in the cold shadows of a ruined city. He is standing in his own field, the late summer sun warming the back of his neck. He can feel the gentle breeze rippling through the tall wheat, a sea of gold stretching out to the horizon. He can hear the soft, rhythmic sweeping sound of the scythes cutting through the stalks. He remembers the feeling of the chaff sticking to his damp skin, the honest, satisfying ache in his muscles at the end of a long day's labor. And then, his memory drifts to his kitchen. He can see his wife, her sleeves rolled up past her elbows, her hands dusted in the very same white powder that now coats his uniform. He watches the rhythmic, hypnotic way she presses and folds the dough on the wooden table, putting her own strength, her own love, into the bread that will feed their children. The memory of the warmth radiating from the brick oven is so real, so vivid, that he can actually feel the ghost of that heat on his chilled cheeks. He holds the small handful of grain tightly, a silent, desperate prayer that the fields will be sown again, that the ovens will be lit again, that the simple, beautiful rhythm of life will someday return. In this isolated world, where everything has been taken away, the smallest things become miracles. Further down the curved wall, a quiet exchange is taking place. Rations have dwindled to almost nothing. The concept of a full meal is a distant, fading dream. What remains are scraps, tiny fragments of sustenance meant to keep the body tethered to the soul for just one more day. A young man, his face barely more than a boy's, reaches into the deep pocket of his greatcoat. His fingers search blindly until they find what he is looking for. He pulls out a small, crumpled piece of waxed paper. Carefully, with trembling hands, he unfolds it. Inside rests a single, sugar cube. It is chipped and dirty, stained with the lint of his pocket and the ever-present dust of the city. He looks at it for a long moment. It is his. He could put it in his mouth and let the sudden, overwhelming sweetness flood his senses, a momentary escape from the bitter taste of the ash. But he does not. He looks to his left. Beside him sits an older man, a comrade whose eyes are closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. The older man has not spoken in hours, his strength slowly seeping into the cold concrete floor. The boy takes the heavy, iron handle of his trench knife and gently, carefully, presses it down on the sugar cube. It fractures with a soft crunch, breaking into 3 uneven pieces. He taps the older man lightly on the knee. The man opens his eyes, the iris is clouded with fatigue. The boy does not say a word. He simply holds out his dirt-stained palm, offering the largest shard of the broken sugar. A quiet, profound understanding passes between them. It is a look of absolute, unconditional brotherhood. The older man reaches out, his fingers brushing against the boy's palm, and takes the piece of sugar. He places it on his tongue, closing his eyes as the sweet energy dissolves. He lets out a long, slow sigh, a sound of profound relief and gratitude. Then, the boy passes the second piece to the man on his right, keeping only the smallest crumb for himself. They sit together in the silence, savoring the microscopic taste of sweetness, sharing a communion of starvation and grace. It is an act of everyday heroism that will never be recorded in any history book, a fleeting moment of pure, unselfish love hidden away in the shadows of the grain. As the invisible sun begins to set outside, the golden pillars of light inside the elevator slowly fade, turning to a soft, melancholy blue. The air grows cooler. The shadows lengthen, reaching out across the floor to pull the men into a deeper embrace. In this fading light, a soldier pulls a folded piece of paper from his tunic. He tilts it toward the dying light, straining his eyes to read the faded ink. The flower falls softly onto the page, like a delicate frost settling over the words of his mother. He reads about the rain in his home village. He reads about the neighbor's new roof, about the letter his sister received from the university. Mundane, beautiful, impossibly distant things. The words act as an anchor, keeping him tethered to his own humanity, reminding him that he is a son, a brother, a man who belongs to a world that is still gentle and kind. He traces the signature with his thumb, wiping away a thin layer of white dust, before folding it carefully and placing it back against his chest, right over his beating heart. The darkness finally reclaims the cavernous space. The high ceiling vanishes into the black. The men do not move. They simply allow the heavy blanket of exhaustion to pull them under. They lean against one another, their shoulders touching, sharing the fragile warmth of their bodies. The concrete is hard and unyielding, but in the comforting dark, surrounded by the sweet, earthy smell of the flower, it feels like a sanctuary. They close their eyes. The soft, rhythmic breathing of the men blends with the absolute stillness of the air. In this silent, suspended space, the war does not exist. There is only the dark, the quiet, and the gentle, drifting dust. They are safe in the belly of the giant. They are held in the quiet memory of the harvest, sleeping peacefully in the shadows of the grain, waiting for the morning they hope will eventually come. To touch the black water of the Volga at midnight is to feel the cold, steady pulse of a sleeping giant. In the deep, quiet hours of a moonless night, the great river undergoes a profound transformation. By day, it is a wide, shimmering ribbon of blue and silver, reflecting the vastness of the steppe sky. But when the sun falls away and the heavy blanket of night descends, the water turns to ink. It becomes the smooth, featureless mirror of obsidian, silently carrying the secrets of the ancient earth toward the distant sea. The wind, which rustles through the dry grasses on the eastern bank, carries the distinct, sharp scent of cold fresh water, wet sand, and the faint, sweet smell of drying reeds. Hidden within these tall reeds, waiting where the land gently slopes down to meet the dark water, are the men. They sit in absolute silence, wrapped tightly in their heavy wool coats, their knees pulled up to their chests to conserve whatever warmth they can. The night air is damp and biting, a chilling preview of the winter that is slowly creeping across the plains. There is no moonlight to guide them, no stars to offer comfort. The sky is hidden behind a thick, low ceiling of clouds. They exist in a world composed entirely of shadows and soft, muffled sounds. The gentle rustle of the wind in the reeds. The soft, rhythmic lapping of the current against the muddy bank. The quiet, shallow breathing of the man sitting just an arm's length away. They are waiting for the boatman. They do not come with the roar of heavy engines or the clash of iron. They arrive as quietly as the tide. Out of the pitch-black canvas of the river, small, low silhouettes slowly begin to materialize. They are wooden fishing boats, the kind that have drifted along these waters for generations, with peeling paint and hulls worn smooth by time and current. They smell deeply of river moss, of old pitch, and of the countless catches of silver fish that once filled their bellies in a gentler time. The men who guide these fragile vessels are not soldiers. They are the grandfathers of the river. They are fishermen, ferrymen, men whose faces are mapped with deep wrinkles carved by decades of sun and wind. They wear thick, knitted sweaters and dark wool caps pulled low over their ears. Their hands are massive and calloused, permanently shaped to the curve of a wooden oar. They know this water intimately, better than they know the lines on their own palms. They know where the currents pull, where the hidden sandbars lie, and how to slip across the vast, dark expanse without making a single, unnecessary sound. As the wooden bows softly scrape against the sandy bank, the waiting men stand. Their movements are slow, deliberate, and reverent. They understand the fragile nature of the crossing they are about to make. One by one, they step into the boats. The old wood groans a soft, comforting protest beneath the sudden weight of their boots. The boat tips and sways gently, a cradle rocking in the dark. A young soldier, his hands numb with the cold, missteps slightly, his boots slipping on the wet timber. Before he can fall, a strong, steady hand reaches out from the darkness. It is the old boatman. He grips the young man's forearm, his touch warm and rough, holding him steady until he finds his balance. "Step lightly, little brother," the old man whispers, his voice like the grinding of smooth river stones. "The water is wide, but she will hold us." There is no need for further words. The young man nods into the darkness, taking his seat on the damp, wooden thwart. He pulls his coat tightly around his shoulders, feeling a sudden, deep wave of gratitude for the simple, anchoring strength of that calloused hand. When the boats are full, sitting low and heavy in the water, the boatmen push away from the bank. The transition from the solid, predictable earth to the shifting, liquid world of the river is a moment of profound surrender. The sandy bottom falls away, and suddenly, there is nothing beneath them but the deep, cold fathoms. The shore they just left dissolves into the night, swallowed completely by the dark. The ruined city on the far western bank is nothing more than a faint, hazy glow in the distance, a smoldering ember at the edge of the world. They are suspended in the middle of the dark. They are floating in the space between what was and what will be. The only sound in the entire universe is the hypnotic, rhythmic song of the oars. The boatman leans forward, dipping the worn wooden blades into the black water. Splash! He pulls back, his strong shoulders moving in a slow, ancient dance. Swirl! He lifts the oars, letting the excess water fall back into the river. Drip, drip, drip. It is a steady, unhurried metronome. Splash! Swirl! Drip! The sound is strangely soothing. It is the heartbeat of the river, a lullaby that quiets the racing minds of the men huddled in the belly of the boat. They lower their heads, their chins resting on their chests, giving themselves over to the gentle, swaying motion of the crossing. In this dark, floating sanctuary, shielded by the cold spray that drifts off the oars, the men turn inward. The silence of the river creates a vast, private space for the soul to wander. A soldier sitting near the stern reaches his cold fingers into the breast pocket of his tunic. He does not pull anything out, he simply rests his hand against a small, hard object wrapped in a scrap of cloth. It is a smooth, polished stone from the creek that ran behind his childhood home. He rubs his thumb over its familiar surface, closing his eyes. Instantly, the cold, damp smell of the Volga vanishes. He is standing barefoot in the shallow, sun-warmed water of a summer afternoon long ago. He can hear the bright, chiming laughter of his younger sister as she chases minnows through the shallows. He can feel the soft, green moss between his toes. He breathes in the memory, letting the phantom warmth of that distant sun thaw the chill in his chest. He whispers a silent, wordless prayer into the dark, not for victory, not for glory, but simply for the preservation of that small, beautiful stream, and for the hope that he might one day walk its banks again. Across from him, another man is reciting a letter in his mind. He has read it so many times by the light of a flickering match that the paper is falling apart, but he no longer needs to see the words. He knows their exact cadence, the precise slope of his wife's handwriting. The nights are growing colder here, her voice echoes softly in his mind, blending with the splash of the oars. I have patched the heavy quilt, the one with the blue squares. I sleep on your side of the bed now, so it does not feel so empty. Come home to me before the snow falls. A single tear, warm and heavy, escapes the corner of his eye, tracing a clean path through the fine layer of dust on his cheek. He does not wipe it away. He lets it fall, a tiny offering of sorrow and love joining the vast, dark waters of the river below. He silently promises the ghost of her voice that he will try. He will try to make it back to the blue quilt. The cold spray of the Volga kisses their faces, a fine, damp mist that tastes of minerals and deep earth. It is a waking baptism, a gentle reminder that they are alive, that their blood still runs warm beneath their heavy coats. The boatman rows on. He does not rush. He knows that haste makes noise, and noise on the river at night is a dangerous thing. He is a shepherd of shadows, guiding his small flock across the abyss with the quiet, unassuming heroism of a man simply doing what must be done. He does not ask their names. He does not know where they come from. He only knows that they are cold, that they are afraid, and that it is his duty to carry them safely to the other side. He looks at the hunched silhouettes of the boys sitting before him. In the gloom, they do not look like soldiers. They look like tired children, bundled against the winter, seeking a safe place to rest. He alters his stroke just slightly, softening the entry of the oars into the water, trying to make the journey just a little bit smoother, a little bit kinder. It is a microscopic act of grace, a quiet expression of love from an old man to the youth of his country. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the darkness ahead begins to thicken. The featureless black of the horizon takes on jagged, broken shapes. The faint smell of wet ash and cold soot begins to mix with the clean scent of the river. They are nearing the western bank. The hypnotic rhythm of the oars changes. The boatman slows his pace, carefully navigating the submerged debris that litters the shallows. The water here is calm, sheltered by the ruined, towering silhouette of the city above. With a soft, scraping sigh, the wooden bow meets the wet sand. The journey is over. The men stir, pulling themselves from the deep wells of their memories. They adjust their heavy coats, picking up their canvas bags. The spell of the crossing is broken, replaced by the quiet, heavy reality of the shore. They step out of the boat, their boots sinking softly into the damp earth. They do not speak, but as each man passes the old boatman, they offer a silent gesture of gratitude. A brief, firm clasp of a shoulder. A slow, respectful nod in the dark. A whispered, breathless, "Thank you, Father." The old man nods in return, his breath rising in a small, white cloud in the cold air. He watches them walk away, their dark shapes disappearing into the shadows of the broken streets, merging with the ruins of the city. When the last man is gone, the boatman turns back to the water. He pushes the heavy wooden skiff off the sand, the water swirling softly around his knees. He climbs back inside, his massive hands finding their familiar places on the worn handles of the oars. He does not rest. There are more shadows waiting in the reeds on the eastern bank. There are more letters to be carried across the dark, more silent prayers to be sheltered in the belly of his small wooden boat. He dips the oars into the black, mirror-like surface of the Volga. Splash. Swirl. Drip. He slips away from the shore, a silent, solitary ghost fading back into the profound emptiness of the night. The river closes seamlessly behind him, hiding his path, leaving nothing but the gentle, rhythmic lullaby of the water, a quiet testament to the enduring, everyday heroism of the boatmen of the dark river. The earth remembers the weight of a footfall long after the traveler has passed into the stars. High above the shimmering ribbon of the Volga, there is a place where the ground seems to rise up to meet the moon. It is a vast, rounded shoulder of the world, an ancient mound that has stood watch over the steppes since the time of the nomads and the kings of old. Long before the city of stone was ever built, this hill was a sacred place, a quiet cradle for those who had finished their long journey through the sunlit world. It is a burial mound, a silent witness to the passage of ages, where the layers of time are folded into the dark, rich soil like the pages of a forgotten book. Tonight, the hill is bathed in a pale, silver light. The moon hangs low and heavy in the sky, casting long, soft shadows that stretch across the broken ridges and the hollows of the earth. The air is still, carrying the faint, sweet scent of scorched grass and the cool, metallic tang of the night mist. There is a profound, ringing silence here, a quiet so deep that you can almost hear the heartbeat of the world beneath your feet. But this is a different kind of quiet. It is the silence that follows a great storm, the weary stillness that settles over a landscape when the thunder has finally rolled away into the distance. The hill has been changed. Its ancient face is scarred and torn, the smooth grass replaced by mounds of raw, dark earth. And yet, even in its wounded state, the hill remains a sanctuary, a place where the rules of the world below seem to fade into the silver light. If you look closely into the shadows of the deep, winding trenches that lace the hillside, you will see a flicker of movement. It is not the sharp, hurried movement of a hunter, but something softer, something more deliberate. It is the medics. Among them is a young woman named Nina. Her movements are fluid and graceful, like a shadow drifting through a dream. Her hands are small and steady, despite the biting chill of the autumn air. She carries a heavy canvas bag slung over her shoulder, the glass bottles inside clinking softly, a gentle, rhythmic sound that marks her progress through the dark. She does not look for uniforms. She does not look for medals or designations. In the pale moonlight, all colors are muted, blending into shades of charcoal and ash. She only looks for the flicker of a pulse, the soft cloud of a breath in the cold air, the quiet sound of a sigh. She kneels in the damp earth beside a figure slumped against the trench wall. He is young, perhaps 19, with hair the color of ripened rye and eyes that are fixed on the stars above. He is breathing slowly, his chest rising and falling in a shallow, rhythmic labor. Nina does not speak. She simply reaches out and rests her hand on his forehead. Her palm is cool and soothing against his fevered skin. With practiced, gentle movements, she begins to work. She opens a small tin of salve, the sharp, clean scent of pine and camphor cutting through the heavy smell of the earth. She applies it to his wounds with the lightness of a bird's wing. She does not rush. In this space, time has slowed down, stretching out into a single, eternal moment of care. The young man's eyes slowly drift toward her face. He does not see a soldier, he sees a sister, a mother, a ghost of the life he left behind. He reaches into his pocket with a trembling hand and pulls out a small, crumpled photograph. It is a picture of a woman standing in a sun-drenched garden, her arms full of bright, yellow sunflowers. He holds it out to Nina, his voice a mere whisper that is swallowed by the wind. "Tell her," he breathes. "Tell her the garden was beautiful." Nina takes the photograph, her fingers brushing his with a warmth that seems to anchor him to the world. She nods slowly, a silent promise passed between two strangers in the dark. She tucks the photograph safely into his tunic, right over his heart, and pulls a thick, woolen blanket up to his chin. She stays with him for a few minutes more, her presence a quiet wall against the encroaching cold, until his breathing evens out and he drifts into a deep, merciful sleep. She rises and moves further down the line, her boots making a soft, shushing sound in the loose soil. The hill is a maze of these small, private dramas, 1,000 stories written in the dust. She comes upon another figure, lying in a shallow hollow where the grass hasn't yet been burned away. This soldier wears a different uniform, a shade of gray that looks like the evening mist. He is far from home, hundreds of miles from the green valleys and the half-timbered houses of his youth. He is shivering, his teeth chattering in a rhythmic, mechanical cadence. Nina kneels beside him. She does not hesitate. To her, he is not the enemy, he is simply another soul caught in the great silence of the hill. She unscrews the cap of her canteen and lifts his head, resting it against her knee. The water is cool and clear, a liquid light in the darkness. He drinks greedily, his eyes closing in a moment of pure, unadulterated relief. When he is finished, he looks at her with a profound, hollow gratitude. He reaches into his tunic and pulls out a letter, the paper worn soft as silk from being read 100 times. He cannot speak her language, and she cannot speak his, but the language of the heart needs no translation. He points to a name written in elegant, sloping ink at the bottom of the page. Greta. Nina rests her hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture of human connection that transcends the madness of the world. For a moment, they are just two people sitting on an ancient burial mound, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the uncertainty of the future. The war, with its maps and its grand designs, feels impossibly small and distant, like a play being performed on a stage far across the sea. Here, on the Hill of Sighs, there is only the cold air, the silver moon, and the fragile, enduring bond of mercy. She bandages his arm, her fingers moving with the same tenderness she showed the boy with the sunflowers. She finds a piece of chocolate in her pocket, a small, precious luxury, and presses it into his hand. His fingers close around it, and for the first time in weeks, a ghost of a smile touches his lips. It is a microscopic victory, a tiny spark of light in the vast, enveloping dark. As Nina works, she feels the presence of the hill itself. The soil here is heavy, rich with the memories of everyone who has ever stood upon its summit. It has felt the tread of the ancient warriors who are buried deep within its heart. It has felt the gentle rain of 1,000 springs and the harsh, biting frost of 1,000 winters. Now, it absorbs the sorrow of two armies, drinking in the tears and the sighs as if they were nothing more than a summer shower. The hill does not take sides. It does not judge. It simply holds. It holds the letters that will never be mailed. It holds the photographs of mothers and wives and sweethearts. It holds the secret fears whispered into the dark and the quiet prayers for a morning that never seems to come. It is a vast, earthen storehouse of the human spirit, a place where the pain is buried so deep that it becomes part of the landscape itself. The night deepens, and the moon climbs higher, turning the entire hill into a world of luminescent marble. The medics continue their quiet patrol, moving like guardian angels through the ruins. They share their supplies, a Russian medic handing a roll of gauze to a German doctor in a moment of unspoken truce, their eyes meeting in a shared weariness that goes beyond words. They are the weavers of a fragile safety net, trying to catch the falling pieces of a broken world. Nina finds herself standing at the very crest of the hill. From here, she can see the entire city stretched out below her. It looks like a skeleton of a dream, a jagged silhouette of broken walls and empty windows. The Volga is a black mirror, reflecting the fires that still smolder in the distance. But up here, the air is clean. The wind hums a low, mournful tune through the tall, dry stalks of the steppe grass. She reaches into her bag and pulls out a small, wooden cross, carved by her father before she left home. She leans down and presses it into the raw earth, burying it just deep enough so the wind won't take it. It is a small marker, not for a single person, but for the hill itself, a gesture of respect for the ground that bears the weight of so much grief. She thinks of the letters she has read, the voices she has heard in the dark. She thinks of the boy dreaming of his garden and the man longing for his Greta. They are all sons, They are all brothers. They are all travelers who have lost their way in the storm. As the first, faint hint of violet begins to touch the eastern horizon, Nina feels a sudden, overwhelming sense of peace. The hill is quiet now. The shivering has stopped. The sighs have faded into the wind. The earth has turned again, hiding the sorrow of the night beneath a new layer of frost. She begins her descent, her footsteps light on the ancient soil. She knows that when the sun rises, the world below will wake up to the noise and the smoke once again. But she carries the quiet of the hill within her. She carries the warmth of the hands she held and the light of the eyes she comforted. The hill of sighs remains behind her, a silent, silver giant standing watch over the river. It will remain long after the city is rebuilt, long after the trenches are filled and the grass grows green and thick once more. It will hold the stories of this night in its deep, earthen heart forever, a monument to the quiet resilience of the human soul and the gentle, unbreakable power of mercy. And as the stars begin to fade, the hill seems to settle a little deeper into the earth, a mother cradling her children in a long, dreamless sleep, waiting for the peace that only the morning can bring. Even the cold iron seems to sigh when the moon touches the rusted gears, as if the machines are remembering the hands that once gave them life. The great factories of the North City have changed their purpose now. They were once vast, humming hives of creation, cathedrals of industry where the air was thick with the scent of hot oil, the bright sparks of welding torches, and the proud, rhythmic clatter of assembly lines. There were places where the future was forged in steel, where fathers and sons worked side by side to build the machines that would turn the soil of the vast steppe. But today, the hum of the machines has been replaced by a different kind of music, and the towering halls of brick and glass have become skeletal remains, reaching like jagged fingers toward a charcoal sky. Yet, even in this state of ruin, these giants of industry offer a strange, metallic sanctuary. To the weary men who seek shelter within their shattered ribs, the factories are no longer places of work, but immense, hollowed-out caves of refuge. Here, amidst the tangled wreckage of conveyor belts and the overturned hulls of half-finished machines, life continues in the smallest, quietest ways. Imagine stepping into one of these vast assembly halls in the deep violet hour of twilight. The roof, once a solid canopy of iron and glass, is now a lace-like screen of holes, allowing the first stars to peek through. The air is cool and carries the sharp, metallic tang of oxidized iron and cold soot. It is a world of shadows, deep, velvet blacks and soft, shimmering grays. Everything is still, save for the fine dust that drifts through the air like a slow-motion snowfall, settling over the rusted remains of a life that was. In the corner of a long-abandoned machine shop, tucked behind the massive, unmoving bulk of a heavy lathe, a man named Andre has made a home. It is a small space, no larger than a kitchen pantry, but to him, it is a fortress. He has cleared away the shards of glass and the sharp curls of metal shavings, laying down a few layers of corrugated cardboard and a tattered, well-stained blanket. Andre sits with his back against the cold, solid base of the machine. He is tired, the kind of tired that feels as though his very bones have turned to lead. His hands, once used to the delicate work of a watchmaker, are now rough and stained, the skin mapped with small, healing scars. But in this quiet moment, as the factory settles around him, he allows his shoulders to drop. He pulls a small, silver pocket watch from his tunic, a relic of his former life. It doesn't tick anymore, its internal heart was silenced by a jolt weeks ago. But he holds it anyway, his thumb tracing the smooth, worn casing. He isn't checking the time. He is touching a memory. He is remembering the quiet shop on the corner of a cobblestone street, the smell of cedar wood, and the gentle, ticking chorus of 100 clocks all breathing at once. Nearby, other men are tucked into similar iron corners. They look like birds nesting in the ruins of a great ship. One is curled inside the hollowed-out belly of a tank that will never be finished, its steel plates providing a thick, wind-proof shell. Another sleeps atop a high gantry, wrapped in a heavy greatcoat, looking down at the cavernous floor below. There is no rank here, no titles. There are only tired souls seeking a few hours of oblivion. As the night deepens, the wind begins to rise. It comes off the river, cold and persistent, searching for any gap in the ruined walls. It finds the hundreds of shattered pipes that run like silver veins through the ceiling and along the walls. And this is when the factory begins to sing. It is a mournful, haunting sound, a low, hollow thrumming that rises and falls with the gusts of the breeze. The wind whistles through the jagged edges of broken glass and hums through the empty conduits. It sounds like a ghostly organ playing a song without words, a lullaby of twisted steel. It is a lonely sound, yes, but to the men sleeping below, it is also a comfort. It is a constant, a white noise that masks the smaller, more frightening sounds of the world outside. It tells them that the factory is still standing. It tells them that they are sheltered within a giant that, even in its death, still protects its own. In the middle of the hall, a small, orange glow flickers. It is a tiny fire, built inside a discarded metal bucket. 3 men sit around it, their faces illuminated by the dancing light, while the rest of their bodies remain lost in the shadows. They are sharing a single, small tin of warmed meat. They move slowly, their gestures careful and deliberate. One man takes a small spoonful and then passes the tin to his neighbor. There is no talk of the struggle, no discussion of the maps or the movements of the world. Instead, they speak in low, hushed tones of the things they miss. "The apples in my village," one whispers, his eyes fixed on a small flame. "They were so red they looked like polished glass. When you bit into them, they were cold and sweet, and the juice would run down your chin. My mother would bake them with honey and walnuts in the big stone oven. The whole house would smell like autumn and wood smoke." The other 2 men nod slowly, their eyes closing as they allow the description to build a world in their minds. They can almost taste the honey. They can almost feel the warmth of that stone oven. This is the everyday heroism of the factory, the quiet resilience of men who refuse to let the gray, metallic reality of their surroundings dim the vibrant colors of their memories. They use their words to build fires for each other, keeping the coldness of despair at bay with stories of red apples and warm kitchens. Somewhere in the darkness, a soldier named Pavel is writing a letter. He has no table, so he uses the flat, rusted surface of a fallen girder. His pen moves slowly across the scrap of paper, the ink pale and thin. He doesn't write about the fire or the iron. He writes to his younger brother, who is still a schoolboy far to the east. "Study your books, little one," he writes. "Learn about the stars and the way the rivers find the sea. Learn how to build things that last. I am sitting inside a great building tonight, a place where they used to make the machines for the fields. Even though the roof is gone, the walls are strong. They are holding up the sky for us. Be kind to the old dog, and tell mother I am sleeping well. The wind here plays music for us at night." He folds the paper carefully, tucking it into a small leather pouch. He knows the letter might take weeks to travel across the vast distance, but the act of writing it has anchored him. It has reminded him that he is not just a figure in a ruined factory, he is a brother, a son, a person who belongs to a world made of soft things and gentle words. As the midnight hour passes, the small fire in the bucket fades to a bed of glowing embers. The conversations die away, replaced by the rhythmic, heavy breathing of exhausted sleep. The factory settles. The metal, cooling in the night air, occasionally lets out a sharp, metallic pop or a long, low groan as the stresses in the steel shift. One man, unable to sleep, stands and walks to a high window that has lost all its glass. He looks out over the city. From this height, the world is a landscape of shadows and silver light. The river flows like a ribbon of dark silk in the distance. He sees the silhouettes of other factories, other giants standing watch in the dark. He feels a strange sense of kinship with the iron and the stone. They are all enduring together. He reaches out and touches the frame of the window. The metal is biting cold, but it is solid. It is real. He thinks of the thousands of workers who once stood where he is standing, the women who polished the glass, the men who greased the gears. He feels their presence in the silence. Their labor, their pride, and their dreams are woven into the very fabric of the twisted steel. The factory is not just a ruin, it is a repository of human effort, and that effort provides a warmth that the wind cannot touch. He returns to his corner, curling up next to his comrades. The lullaby of the pipes continues, a soft, ethereal whistling that seems to vibrate through the floorboards. It is a song of endurance, a whispered promise that even the most broken things can still provide a home. The men sleep. They dream not of the iron, but of the green fields the tractors were meant to plow. They dream of the golden wheat, of the summer sun, and of the soft, warm beds they left behind. In their dreams, the factory is whole again, the lights are bright, and the air is filled with the joyous, clattering music of creation. Under the watchful eyes of the stars, the hollowed-out giant cradles its small, fragile guests. The twisted steel and the shattered pipes continue their mournful song, a gentle, metallic bedtime story told to a city that is tired to its very soul. And in the quiet gaps between the noise, there is a profound, echoing peace, the peace of the weary finding rest, the peace of the resilient finding shelter, and the quiet, enduring hope that when the sun rises, the song of the wind will eventually turn into a song of the morning. To be still is to realize that even the dust has a story to tell. In the heart of the city, where the tall buildings once reached for the clouds, there is now a different kind of world. It is a landscape made of broken stone, of red brick turned to powder, and of twisted iron that looks like the frozen branches of a winter forest. The sun struggles to find its way through the haze of the afternoon, casting long, soft shadows that stretch across the mounds of debris like velvet ribbons. In this place, the world has slowed down. The frantic pace of the streets, the ringing of the tram bells, and the chatter of the marketplaces have all faded into a profound, heavy silence. It is the silence of a long-held breath. Within these ruins, life has found a new way to exist. It is not a life of movement or noise, but a life of absolute, shimmering stillness. If you were to look closely at a pile of shattered masonry or the hollowed-out shell of a corner bakery, you might see a figure. A man lies there, wrapped in a tattered wool coat the color of the earth itself. He is so still that the fine, silver dust of the city has begun to settle on his shoulders, turning him into a part of the landscape. He has become a ghost among ghosts, a silent witness to the passing of the hours. This is the art of patience. For those who live within the ruins, the greatest strength is not found in a loud voice or a quick step, but in the ability to become invisible. To lie for 3, 4, 6 hours without moving a single muscle. To let the mind wander to distant places while the body remains as cold and unyielding as the stone it rests upon. In this suspended state, the senses become incredibly sharp. The world, which once seemed so vast and chaotic, narrows down to the small space immediately before the eyes. A single leaf, brown and withered, catches a stray current of air. It is a traveler from a park that no longer exists, a tiny fragment of the summer that was. It drifts slowly through the air, tumbling and turning in the soft light. To the man lying in the debris, this leaf is the most important thing in the universe. He watches it with an intense, quiet focus. He notices the way the light catches the delicate veins on its underside. He watches the way it pauses on a jagged piece of glass before being lifted again by the wind. In a world where the big things, the maps, the movements of armies, the shifting of borders, are too heavy to contemplate, the journey of a leaf is a miracle of simple existence. He breathes slowly, shallowly. He is conscious of the weight of his own breath. In the biting chill of the late autumn air, each exhale is a tiny, translucent cloud that lingers for a moment before vanishing. He tries to breathe so softly that even the air around him does not notice. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic cycle. Inhale the scent of cold brick and wet ash. Exhale the warmth of a life that refuses to be extinguished. Every breath is a quiet victory. Every heartbeat is a drumbeat in the silence, a reminder that he is still here, still part of the story. To pass the time, he reaches into the deep, warm pockets of his memory. He does not think of the fire or the noise. He thinks of the small, soft things. He remembers the way the morning light used to hit the wooden table in his mother's kitchen, making the grain of the wood look like a flowing river. He remembers the smell of fresh linen drying on a line in the sun, and the sound of his younger brother's boots clicking against the cobblestones as they walked to school. These memories are like smooth stones he carries in his pockets, turning them over and over in his mind until they are polished and bright. They are his anchors, keeping him tethered to the man he was before the world turned to stone. Sometimes, he feels the presence of others. A few yards away, hidden behind a fallen girder, another figure lies just as still. They do not speak. They do not look at each other. But there is a profound, unspoken connection between them. It is a brotherhood of silence. They are sharing the same cold air, the same gray light, the same heavy patience. They are two souls holding onto the earth together. Earlier that morning, when the light was still blue and thin, the other man had reached out and slid a small, hard crust of bread across the dust. No words were exchanged. Just a hand appearing from the shadows, an offering of kindness, and then the return to stillness. That crust of bread, shared in the dark, held more meaning than 1,000 speeches. It was a promise that they were not alone. As the afternoon light begins to fail, turning from gold to a soft, melancholic violet, the city begins to speak. It is not a loud voice, but a collection of tiny sounds that only the patient can hear. The wind hums a low, mournful tune through a shattered pipe. A loose stone somewhere deep in a ruin gives way, falling with a soft clink against the rubble. Far off, the Volga murmurs to itself, its dark waters flowing steadily toward the sea. The man in the debris listens to these sounds, imagining them to be the heartbeat of the city. Stalingrad is not dead, she is merely resting, her pulse slow and steady beneath the weight of the winter. He thinks of the letters he has written in his head. He has no paper, no pen, and no way to send them, but he composes them anyway, letting the words drift like the leaf. Dearest Anna, he thinks. I am lying in the quiet today. The sun was out for a little while, and I saw a leaf dance. It reminded me of the way you used to spin in the garden when the first rain came. Do not worry for me. The stones are hard, but they are also strong, and I am learning to be like them. I am keeping my breath steady. I am waiting for the spring. The cold begins to seep into his bones, a slow, creeping numbness that starts in his toes and fingers and works its way toward his heart. He welcomes it in a strange way. The cold makes the stillness easier. It blurs the edges of his physical self, making him feel as though he is dissolving into the brick and the dust. He becomes a part of the history of the place, a layer of resilience added to the foundation of the streets. He is a guardian of the silence. The darkness eventually arrives, settling over the ruins like a heavy, protective blanket. The stars begin to appear, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast, black sky. They are the same stars that shine over the quiet villages and the sleeping forests far to the east. Looking up at them, the man feels a sense of immense peace. The world is so much larger than this city, so much older than this struggle. The stars do not move for the fire, they do not dim for the smoke. They simply are. He shifts his position, only slightly, the first movement he has made in hours. The sound of his coat brushing against the rubble seems like a thunderclap in his ears. He settles back down, closing his eyes for a moment. He listens to the quiet breathing of his comrade nearby. He listens to the wind. He listens to his own heart. The weight of a single breath is heavy, but it is a weight he is proud to carry. It is the weight of hope. It is the weight of a human soul refusing to be crushed by the magnitude of the world. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, pale and cold, and the leaf will have found a place to rest in the dust. He will still be here, a silent figure in the ruins, lying perfectly still, listening to the heartbeat of the city and waiting for the moment when he can finally, softly, exhale. Until then, he remains a part of the earth, a part of the stone, a part of the long, quiet dream of the city. The shadows deepen, the frost begins to glitter on the shattered glass, and the world drifts into a deep, watchful sleep. He is safe in the stillness. He is home in the silence. And as the night grows old, he finds a strange, beautiful comfort in the simple knowledge that he is still breathing, still waiting, and still whole. The sky finally took pity on the blackened earth, sending down a million tiny, white prayers to cover the wounds of the world. For months, the city had been a landscape of gray and charcoal, a place where the air tasted of pulverized brick and the bitter tang of scorched iron. But on this quiet afternoon in November, the heavy, leaden clouds that had hung low over the Volga began to soften. The wind, which had been biting and sharp, suddenly fell still, as if the atmosphere itself were holding its breath in anticipation. And then, without a sound, the first flake descended. It was a delicate, shimmering thing, a piece of frozen lace that tumbled through the hazy air with an unhurried grace. It landed on the rusted barrel of a forgotten machine, a single point of purity against the jagged remains of a world that had forgotten what it meant to be clean. Then came another, and another, until the air was filled with a slow-motion dance of white feathers, drifting down to touch the charred beams of the factories and the shattered glass of the apartment blocks. This was the first snow. In any other year, in any other place, it would have been a sign of the seasons turning, a call to bring in the wood and light the hearth. But here, amidst the ruins, it felt like a miracle of silence. If you were to walk through the skeletal remains of the central plaza, you would see men who had been hardened into stone by the struggle slowly lifting their faces toward the heavens. They stopped where they stood, letting their heavy iron tools and wooden crates rest in the dust. They watched the sky. There was no noise of thunder now, no rushing of engines. There was only the microscopic sound of the snow meeting the earth, a soft, hushing whisper that seemed to absorb the jagged edges of the silence. One young man, whose uniform was so worn and dusted with ash that he seemed to disappear into the rubble, reached out a gloved hand. He watched a snowflake land on his palm, marveling at the intricate, hexagonal geometry of its design. For a fleeting second, it sat there, a perfect star, before the warmth of his skin turned it into a clear, cold bead of water. He did not wipe it away. He watched it soak into the fabric, a tiny baptism of the spirit. He tilted his head back, closing his eyes, and stuck out his tongue, catching the flakes as they fell. The taste was sharp and clean, the purest thing he had felt in months. It tasted of high mountains and distant forests. It tasted of a world that existed before the smoke. As the cold moisture melted on his tongue, the ruins around him began to dissolve into the mist of memory. He was no longer a figure in a broken city. He was a boy again, 7 years old, standing on the wooden porch of his family's cottage in the deep woods of the east. He could hear the muffled laughter of his sisters as they struggled to pull their heavy wool stockings over their feet. He could smell the sweet, heavy scent of a honey cake cooling on the windowsill. He remembered the way his father would lift him onto a wooden sled, the runners hissing against the fresh powder as they raced toward the frozen pond. In that world, the snow was a playground, a white canvas for the dreams of children. Nearby, tucked into the hollow of a collapsed doorway, another man watched the same sky. He was from a village far to the west, a place of rolling hills and vineyards that felt like a dream from another lifetime. He pulled a tattered letter from his breast pocket, the paper soft as silk from constant folding. He didn't read the words, he knew them by heart, but he looked at the ink, which seemed to stand out more sharply against the whitening landscape. His wife had written to him about the first frost in their garden. She told him how the pumpkins had grown large and orange, and how their youngest son had tried to catch the frost on his eyelashes. As the man looked up, a snowflake caught on his own lashes, blurring the world into a shimmering, watery silver. He felt a sudden, deep surge of quiet resilience. If the snow could fall here, if it could still find its way to this broken place, then perhaps the world was not entirely lost. He imagined the snow falling on his garden at home, covering the empty space where he used to stand. The same sky was embracing them both, connecting the ruins to the vineyards with a single, unbroken blanket of white. The snow began to fall more thickly now, a steady, rhythmic descent that started to transform the city into a cathedral of ice. The jagged piles of bricks were softened into rounded mounds. The dark, gaping holes in the walls were trimmed with white lace. Even the twisted, blackened beams of the tractor factory were given a new, shimmering skin. It was as if the earth were trying to heal itself, applying a cool, clean bandage to its scorched flesh. In this hushed environment, small moments of human kindness bloomed like winter flowers. Two men, who had spent the morning in the cold shadows of a cellar, emerged into the whitening street. They saw a comrade shivering violently, his coat torn and his hands blue with the cold. Without a word, one man reached into his satchel and pulled out a spare pair of woolen socks, while the other took off his own scarf, a hand-knitted thing of dark green yarn, and wrapped it around the shivering man's neck. They didn't speak of the winter to come, or the danger that lay ahead. They simply nodded to one another, their breaths rising in three small, white clouds that mingled and disappeared into the falling snow. In the deep basements where the families lived, the arrival of the snow brought a different kind of peace. A grandmother sat near a small, smoky lamp, watching the white dusting settle on the cellar steps. She called the children to her, and they huddled under a heavy quilt made of mismatched scraps of fabric. She began to tell them a story, not a story of the world they saw every day, but a fairy tale about a snow queen who lived in a palace made of stars. "The snow is the sky's way of tucking the world in for the night," she whispered, her voice a low, rhythmic murmur that matched the falling flakes. "It covers the tired trees and the sleepy houses, keeping them warm until the spring comes to wake them up." The children listened with wide, wonder-filled eyes, their fears momentarily forgotten. To them, the snow wasn't a tactical change or a harbinger of hardship, it was magic. They reached out to touch the white powder that drifted down the stairs, their small fingers tracing patterns in the frost. Out on the edges of the city, the great river Volga began to change its tune. The water, which had been a dark, churning gray, grew still and heavy. Small plates of ice began to form along the banks, tinkling against the stones like tiny bells. The snow fell onto the water and vanished, a silent communion between the sky and the deep. The boatmen, crossing the river in the twilight, found that the snow muffled the sound of their oars even further. They moved through a world of white on white, ghosts in a shimmering mist, guided only by the faint, orange glow of a solitary lantern on the far shore. The light began to fade, the afternoon turning into a deep, sapphire blue. The fires that usually smoldered in the ruins were dampened by the moisture, their orange tongues licking at the snow before being hissed into gray smoke. The city took on a spectral beauty. In the moonlight, the frost glittered like a million scattered diamonds, turning the debris into a landscape of silver. Men crawled into their shelters, their movements slow and heavy. They brushed the snow from their shoulders, a gesture that felt like shedding the weight of the day. They lay down on their beds of straw and cardboard, pulling their blankets tight. They listened to the silence. It was a physical presence now, a heavy, velvet curtain that had been drawn across the city. Inside a ruined library, a man sat alone, leaning against a shelf of scorched books. He picked up a volume that had survived the flames, its edges blackened but its pages still whole. He opened it to a poem about a winter evening, written by a man who had lived 100 years ago. He read the words slowly, his breath misting the page. The poem spoke of the beauty of the white woods and the peace of the frozen fields. He looked out through a hole in the wall at the city of Stalingrad, now a sculpture of white sorrow. He realized then that the snow did not care about the maps. It did not care about the names of the streets or the colors of the flags. It fell with an absolute, terrifying impartiality, covering the fallen of both sides with the same gentle shroud. In the eyes of the winter, they were all just children of the earth, seeking warmth in a cold universe. He felt a strange sense of relief in this realization. The snow had stripped away the noise and the anger, leaving only the essential truth of their existence. They were cold. They were tired. And they were all looking at the same moon. He closed the book and tucked it under his head like a pillow. The cold was deepening, a sharp, crystalline ache that settled into the joints. But for tonight, the fire was gone. The dust was settled. The world was quiet. The first snowflakes continued to fall, a steady, unceasing rain of white lace. They filled the trenches and the craters. They covered the abandoned carts and the broken chimneys. They formed a vast, glittering blanket that stretched from the banks of the Volga all the way to the distant, dark horizon of the steppe. Under this blanket of white sorrow, the city slept. It was a sleep of profound exhaustion, a pause in the heartbeat of history. The men dreamed of childhood winters, of the smell of pine and the taste of warm bread. They dreamed of the mothers who used to tuck them in, and the fathers who used to carry them through the drifts. In their dreams, the white world was a place of safety, a sanctuary where the only sound was the soft, rhythmic breathing of a family at rest. The snow fell on, silent and eternal, a gentle, frozen lullaby for a broken world, promising that even in the heart of the deepest winter, there is a beauty that cannot be broken, and a peace that waits beneath the frost. The earth has a way of speaking when the wind falls silent, a low murmur that travels through the soles of the feet long before it reaches the ears. It is a morning in late November, and the world has been painted in 100 shades of white and blue. The frost is no longer a delicate dusting, it has become a thick, crystalline armor that coats every surface. It clings to the rusted skeletons of the factories, it laces the edges of the shattered windows, and it turns the very air into a haze of tiny, glittering diamonds that hang suspended in the pale light. The sun is a distant, silver coin, offering light but no warmth, a cold spectator to the transformation of the landscape. Everything is hushed. The frantic noise of the autumn months has settled into a deep, rhythmic breathing. In the trenches and the cellars, the men sit very still, wrapped in every layer of fabric they possess. They look like mounds of gray wool and frozen earth, their breath rising in slow, steady plumes of white mist. In this profound quiet, the senses become hyper-aware. You can hear the snap of a frozen twig 100 yards away. You can hear the soft, metallic sigh of a rifle being shifted against the coat. And then, it begins. It is not a sound at first. It is a tremor, a subtle vibration that originates somewhere far beyond the horizon, out in the vast, empty reaches of the frozen steppe. Imagine a cup of cold tea sitting on a wooden crate. The surface of the liquid begins to ripple, tiny concentric circles dancing from the center to the edge. It is a heartbeat, deep and resonant, as if the planet itself were shifting its weight in its sleep. The men in the ruins feel it. They pause in their tasks. A man named Johann, who was trying to light a small fire with damp wood, stops and rests his palms flat against the frozen ground. He closes his eyes. He can feel the tremor through his gloves, a rhythmic thrumming that feels like a distant, heavy drum being played beneath the earth. It is coming from the north, and it is coming from the south. It is the sound of the world closing in. Johann doesn't know about the maps in the high-ceilinged rooms far away. He doesn't know about the lines of movement or the names of the grand maneuvers. He only knows the feeling of the earth beneath him. He looks at his comrade, a quiet man named Karl, who is leaning against a jagged piece of brickwork. Their eyes meet. There is no panic in that look, only a sudden, profound clarity. It is the look of two people who realize they are no longer the ones moving forward. They are the ones standing still while the rest of the world turns its back. The horizon, which for months had been a line of hope, a place where supplies and letters and the way home lived, has changed its character. It feels heavy now, a solid wall of white and gray that has begun to curve around them. The vastness of the steppe, once so intimidating in its size, now feels like a closing hand. A deep, hollow isolation begins to settle into their bones, a chill that no fire can touch. It is the realization that the thread connecting them to the rest of the world has grown thin, and perhaps, in the middle of this cold, vibrating morning, it has finally snapped. Johann pulls a small, wooden pencil from his pocket and a scrap of paper that once wrapped a piece of hard chocolate. His fingers are stiff, the joints aching from the cold, but he begins to write. He doesn't write about the tremors or the closing ring. He writes about the light. Dearest Maria, he scribbles, his handwriting shaky and small. The frost is very beautiful today. It looks as though the city has been dipped in silver. I am sitting in the sun for a moment, and I can hear the ice singing on the river. I am thinking of the way the frost used to look on our bedroom window, like little forests made of glass. Stay warm, my love. Eat well. I am holding you in my heart. He folds the paper carefully and tucks it into his deepest pocket, near his chest. He knows the mail might not leave today. He knows the roads might be white and empty. But the act of writing the words is a way to push back against the isolation. It is a bridge of ink across the freezing distance. Throughout the city, this same quiet realization is unfolding. In a basement near the riverbank, a group of men are sharing a single pot of thin soup. They sit in a circle, the steam from the pot veiling their faces. Usually, they would talk about their homes, or the food they would eat when they finally left this place. But today, they are silent. They listen to the distant thrumming. Every few minutes, the vibration grows slightly stronger, a low thump-thump that rattles the loose plaster on the ceiling. One man, an older soldier with a kind, lined face, reaches out and touches the arm of the young boy sitting next to him. The boy is staring at the soup, his shoulders trembling slightly. Listen to the river, son, the older man whispers, his voice like dry leaves. The Volga is still flowing beneath the ice. It's been there for 1,000 years. It doesn't care about the noise. It just keeps going. We are like the river. We stay quiet, we stay steady, and we keep going. The boy looks up, and the older man offers him a small, gentle smile, a flickering candle of human warmth in the vast, freezing dark. The boy takes a breath, his shoulders settling. They share the soup, passing the ladle with a slow, reverent grace, a small communion of the isolated. Outside, the tremors continue. The sky remains a perfect, mocking blue. The frost glitters, indifferent to the movement of the armies. If you were to look down from high above, you would see the city of Stalingrad as a tiny, jagged island in a sea of white. To the north and south, the vast columns of the earth are moving, a slow and inexorable closing of the gates. The ring is not a physical thing you can see, but it is a presence you can feel in the air, a sudden thickening of the atmosphere, a weight that makes the breath feel a little shorter. The isolation is not just about the roads being blocked. It is a shift in the soul. It is the transition from being a part of a great, surging machine to being a solitary light in a dark room. The men look at the ruins around them with new eyes. These broken walls are no longer just a place to wait, they are their entire world. The rubble, the cellar, the frozen square, this is the beginning and the end of the universe for now. But within that small universe, the humanity becomes more concentrated. Because the world outside has faded, the world inside becomes more vivid. A shared cigarette becomes a grand feast. A word of encouragement becomes a heroic act. A letter written to a wife who may never read it becomes a sacred testament. As evening begins to fall, the silver light of the day turns into a deep, bruised purple. The tremors in the frost seem to quiet down, replaced by a cold, singing wind that sweeps in from the Volga. The men crawl into their sleeping places, burrowing deep into the earth, into the straw, into each other's warmth. Johann lies on his back, looking up at the stars through a hole in the roof. They are so bright, so clear, so impossibly far away. He thinks about the ring closing around the city. He thinks about the distance between himself and Maria. He reaches into his pocket and touches the folded paper. He feels the vibration one last time, a faint, rhythmic pulse against his spine. It is the earth saying, I am here. He takes a slow, deep breath, letting the cold air fill his lungs. He is isolated, yes. He is trapped in a city of ice and shadow. But as he closes his eyes, he realizes that the ring cannot close around his mind. It cannot trap his memories of the silver frost on his window at home, or the warmth of Maria's hand, or the taste of the autumn apples. In the silence of the frost, he finds a quiet resilience. He is a single breath in a vast winter, but he is a breath that continues. Around him, the city sleeps, a jagged island of humanity held in the grip of the cold. The tremors have faded into the night, leaving only the stars and the frost and the long, slow wait for the morning. The ring is closed, but inside the circle, the heart still beats, a small, defiant drum in the great, white silence. A piece of paper is a fragile bridge, but tonight, it is the only way home. The winter has deepened into something ancient and absolute. Outside the hollowed shells of the apartment blocks, the world has been bleached of all color, leaving only a vast, shimmering blue under the light of a cold, distant moon. The wind does not just blow, it sings a low, mournful song through the gaps in the bricks, carrying the fine, crystalline dust of the steppe across the ruins. Inside the cellars and the dugouts, the air is so still you can hear the frost growing on the walls, a soft, creeping lace of ice that claims everything it touches. In this deep, frozen silence, a soldier named Peter sits by the flickering light of a single, guttering candle. He is wrapped in 3 layers of wool, his greatcoat stiffened by the rime, but his attention is focused entirely on a small, torn scrap of paper resting on his knee. It is the back of an old ration manifest, gray and coarse, but to him, it is more precious than silk. He holds a small fountain pen, but the ink has turned to a dark, stubborn pebble of ice inside the barrel. Peter does not grow frustrated. He moves with a slow, patient grace. He brings the pen to his lips, breathing his own fading warmth onto the nib, waiting for that single, miraculous drop of liquid to bloom. He is a man mining for words in a wasteland of ice. When the ink finally flows, it is a pale, watery blue. He begins to write. He does not write of the hunger, or the gray horizon, or the circle of iron that has closed around the city. Those things belong to the world of the living, and Peter is writing to a world of the heart. Dearest Elena, he begins. His handwriting is shaky, a reflection of the shivers he can no longer control, but the words are steady. Tonight, the snow is falling so softly that I can hear it touching the ground. It reminds me of the white curtains in our bedroom, the way they used to dance in the breeze on those long June afternoons. Do you remember the scent of the linden trees? I can smell them now, even through the frost. He pauses, looking at the flame of the candle. In the golden glow, he doesn't see a ruined city. He sees a wooden table. He sees a bowl of bright, red apples. He sees the way the light used to catch the stray hairs at the nape of his wife's neck while she bent over her sewing. These memories are his sanctuary. Every word he scratches onto the paper is a brick he is laying to rebuild the home he left behind. All around him, in the shadows of the dugout, other men are engaged in the same quiet ritual. They are a brotherhood of the pen, huddling over bits of paper rescued from the pockets of fallen comrades or torn from the flyleaf of a scorched book. There is a profound, sacred quality to the scene, the scratching of metal on paper, the soft puff of white breath, the occasional sigh that ripples through the dark. They are writing their final testaments, not of their deeds, but of their loves. One young boy, whose face is still smooth despite the soot, is writing to his mother. He asks her if the old dog still sleeps by the stove. He tells her he has kept his socks dry, a gentle lie intended to keep her heart from breaking. Another man, older, with eyes that have seen too much, writes to a daughter he has never met, trying to describe the sound of his own voice so she might recognize it in her dreams. These letters are filled with the mundane and the beautiful. They speak of the taste of wild strawberries, the coldness of a mountain stream, the specific rhythm of a village bell on a Sunday morning. They are a collection of small, flickering lights, held up against an immense and encroaching dark. As Peter finishes his letter, he reaches a difficult moment. He knows the reality of the city. He knows that the airfields are far away, and the planes that brave the winter sky are few and far between. There is no postman coming to this cellar. There is no guarantee that this scrap of paper will ever leave the ruins of the Volga. But he does not despair. He folds the paper with meticulous care, creasing the edges with a numb thumb until it is a small, tight square. He writes her name on the outside in his best script, a final act of devotion. "I am sending this to you on the wind," he whispers to the empty air. He believes, in the way that only those at the edge of the world can believe, that a thought, once committed to paper with enough love, becomes a physical force. He believes that if the paper should fall into the snow and dissolve, the words will simply be absorbed by the earth, traveling through the roots of the grass and the flow of the water until they find the person they were meant for. He is trusting his hope to the elements. In the early hours of the morning, a small group of men prepares to move. They carry a heavy canvas sack filled with these folded squares of paper, hundreds of them, a mountain of unspoken longings. They make their way through the jagged shadows of the city toward a small, frozen clearing where the hum of an engine can be heard in the distance. A transport plane has landed, its skis hissing against the ice. It is a fragile thing of cloth and wire, looking like a moth in the middle of a hurricane. The pilot, his face masked by leather and fur, accepts the sack of letters. He does not ask for orders. He does not check the weight. He knows what he is carrying. He is carrying the souls of the city. As the plane struggles into the air, vanishing into the swirling white haze of a sudden blizzard, those left behind stand in the silence. They watch the spot where the light disappeared. They feel a strange, hollow relief. Their words are gone. Their secrets have been cast into the sky. But for many, the wind is the only career they will ever know. Imagine a soldier sitting in a high, ruined tower, looking out over the endless white steppe. He has a letter in his hand, but he has no way to send it. He watches a sudden gust of wind pick up a swirl of snow, turning it into a dancing ghost. He holds the letter out into the cold air. He lets it go. The paper flutters for a moment, looking like a wounded bird, before the wind catches it fully. It rises high above the shattered chimneys, tumbling over the frozen river, a white speck in a white world. It might catch in the branches of a lonely birch tree. It might be buried under a drift that will not melt until May. But even if the letter is never read by human eyes, the act of sending it has changed the air. The wind that sweeps through the ruins is no longer just a cold, indifferent force of nature. It is now a wind that carries the names of children, the promises of husbands, and the quiet prayers of sons. The atmosphere of the city is thick with these invisible messages, creating a canopy of human connection that the iron and the frost can never break. On the far side of the world, in kitchens that smell of wood smoke and tea, women pause in their work. They look toward the east, toward the window where the frost is beginning to bloom. They feel a sudden, inexplicable warmth in their chests, a fleeting sense of being watched, of being loved. They do not know that at that very moment, a scrap of paper is dancing across a frozen river 1,000 miles away. They only know that the heart has a way of hearing what the ears cannot. The night in the city continues its slow, majestic turn. The stars are so bright they seem to crackle in the cold. Peter lies down in his corner, pulling his coat over his head. He feels lighter now. His words are out there, somewhere in the blue twilight, traveling home. He closes his eyes and listens to the wind. He doesn't hear a storm. He hears the rustle of a June breeze through the linden trees. He hears the soft clink of a teacup against a saucer. He hears the voice of Elena calling him in from the garden. The ink may have frozen in the pen, and the paper may be lost to the drifts, but the love that wrote those lines is immortal. It is a flame that the winter cannot extinguish. As the snow falls, covering the ruins in a fresh, glittering shroud, the city of Stalingrad becomes a vast, silent library of the heart, a place where every stone and every flake of snow holds a fragment of a story, a letter to the wind, a whispered vow that even in the darkest night, we are never truly alone. Sleep now, and listen. Can you hear it? The soft scratching of a pen on a scrap of paper. The rustle of a folded envelope. The long, slow exhale of a soul finding its way home. The letters are flying tonight, soaring over the Volga, drifting over the steppe, guided by a love that is stronger than the frost. They are finding their way back to the gardens, back to the kitchens, back to the light. And in that journey, the world is made whole again, one whispered word at a time. The sky has become a heavy ceiling of unmoving wool, pressing down upon the jagged teeth of the city. In these short, pale days of December, the world above has lost its depth. There is no blue left in the heavens, only a vast, unchanging expanse of slate and pearl. It is a sky that refuses to breathe, a thick curtain of fog and frost that has settled over the Volga like a giant, silent shroud. For the men huddled in the hollows of the earth, the sky has become the only thing that matters. It is their window to a world that still knows the warmth of a hearth and the smell of roasting coffee, a world that feels as distant as the stars that hide behind the clouds. They spend their hours looking upward. In the trenches, in the shattered basements, and behind the rusted hulls of abandoned machines, thousands of pairs of eyes are fixed on the gray. Necks are stiff from the constant vigil. The skin around their eyes is creased with a permanent, weary strain. They are searching for a break in the mist, for a single sliver of light, or for the small, dark speck that would signal the arrival of the iron birds. Every sound in the stillness is magnified. The soft, rhythmic crunch of snow beneath a boot. The metallic sigh of a frozen girder shifting in the wind. But the sound they listen for is a low, persistent thrumming, the heartbeat of an engine far away. Sometimes, the wind plays tricks on the mind. It catches in a shattered pipe and creates a hollow hum that sounds just like a distant wing. A man will sit up, his heart fluttering like a trapped bird, his breath catching in his throat. He will nudge his comrade, his eyes wide and bright with a sudden, painful hope. "Do you hear it?" he whispers, his voice trembling with the weight of 1,000 prayers. The other man will pause, tilting his head toward the gray heavens. They will wait together, two statues of ice and wool, listening as the wind fades and the hum vanishes into the silence. They do not speak of the disappointment. They simply settle back into their corners, pulling their coats tighter, the silence feeling a little heavier, a little colder than it did a moment before. Hope is a flickering flame, and out here in the cold, it is a tiring thing to keep alive. It consumes the spirit, demanding a strength that the body can no longer provide. To hope is to wait with a clenched jaw and a racing heart. It is to live in the future, in a moment of salvation that never quite arrives. But as the days blur into one another, and the clouds remain a solid, unyielding wall, something begins to change in the hearts of the men. The frantic, sharp edge of hope begins to soften. It is replaced by a quiet, steady acceptance, a gentle surrender to the present moment. It is a transition that brings a strange, unexpected peace, like the feeling of finally lying down in a warm bed after a journey that has lasted for years. Imagine a soldier named Hans. He sits in the lee of a collapsed brick wall, his legs wrapped in strips of burlap to keep out the biting frost. In his lap, he holds a small, silver locket, the metal dulled by the smoke of the city. Inside is a tiny, hand-painted portrait of a woman with golden hair and a soft, knowing smile. A week ago, Hans would look at this locket and feel a sharp, agonizing pang of longing. He would scan the sky with a desperate, frantic energy, praying for the planes to bring him the fuel that would eventually carry him back to that smile. But today, Hans is different. He looks up at the gray heavens, and he does not feel the need to beg. He sees the beauty in the texture of the clouds, the way the light filters through the mist like milk poured into tea. He realizes that the clouds are not a prison, but a blanket. They are protecting the city from the harsh, cold glare of the sun. He looks at the portrait of the woman, and instead of pain, he feels a deep, quiet gratitude. He is grateful that she is warm. He is grateful that she is far from the gray. He closes the locket with a soft click and tucks it away, not with a sigh of despair, but with a nod of contentment. He has stopped waiting for the future to begin. He has decided to inhabit the now. This quiet acceptance is a form of everyday heroism. It is the resilience of a soul that has found its own internal warmth when the world outside has been drained of all heat. It shows itself in the smallest, most delicate gestures. In a basement beneath the ruined library, a man named Matthias is sitting by a small, smoky fire made of old wooden chair legs. He has a single, small potato in his hand, a treasure that he has carried in his pocket for 3 days. It is his only food, a small, wrinkled knot of life in the frozen dark. He could eat it all at once, letting the taste of the earth fill his mouth for a fleeting, wonderful minute. But instead, Matthias looks at the man sitting across from him. This man is young, his eyes glazed with exhaustion, his chin resting on his chest in a heavy, shallow sleep. Without a word, Matthias reaches for a small, rusted knife and carefully, meticulously, slices the potato in two. He sets one half on the edge of the other man's boot, a quiet offering of salt and starch. He does not wait for a thank you. He doesn't need the other man to wake up. He simply leans back against the brickwork, taking a tiny bite of his own half, savoring the cool, earthy crunch. He feels a sudden, profound sense of connection to the stranger, to the city, and to the gray, silent heavens above. In this shared moment of starvation and grace, he is more than just a soldier in a hole. He is a part of a great, enduring story, a single, quiet note in the symphony of the human spirit. Throughout the city, this same quiet grace begins to settle. Men no longer look at their maps with the same frantic energy. They don't listen to the radio with the same desperate hope for a breakthrough. Instead, they tell stories to each other, their voices a low, rhythmic murmur that blends with the wind. They talk about the gardens of their youth. They talk about the taste of wild strawberries, the coldness of a mountain stream, the feeling of a warm, wool rug beneath their bare feet. They describe these things with an intense, poetic detail, as if they are painting a picture on the gray canvas of the sky. The cherry trees, a man named Carl whispers, his eyes closed. They would bloom so thickly that the ground looked like it was covered in pink snow. When the breeze came, the blossoms would drift into the well, and the water would taste like flowers. My mother would sit on the wooden bench, her hands in her apron, just watching the bees. They were so loud, those bees. They sounded like 1,000 tiny cellos playing at once. The men listening to Carl's voice close their eyes. They feel the warmth of the sun on their faces. They smell the sweet, heavy scent of the cherry blossoms. They hear the hum of the bees. For a few minutes, the gray, silent city of Stalingrad is gone. They are home. And then, a sound begins to emerge from the mist. It is not a hum. It is a low, rhythmic thumping, a mechanical heartbeat that seems to be coming from every direction at once. The men stir. They look up. The gray heavens are still solid, still unmoving. But the sound grows louder, a heavy, resonant drumbeat that vibrates in the floorboards. A shadow begins to take shape in the clouds. It is a dark, flickering speck, a bird of iron struggling through the fog. A gasp ripples through the trenches. A few men stand up, their hands shielding their eyes from the pale glare. There, a voice shouts, its edge sharp with a sudden, renewed energy. There she is. The plane is a Ju-52, its wings tiered with frost, its engines trailing a long, thin ribbon of gray smoke. It looks fragile and small against the vast, indifferent sky. It circles the ruins once, twice, its low roar shaking the snow from the eaves of the shattered buildings. But the clouds are too thick. The fog is too heavy. The pilot, his face hidden behind leather and glass, tilts the wings of the plane, a silent, sorrowful gesture of farewell. He cannot find the landing strip. He cannot drop his precious cargo of bread and bandages into the white, featureless landscape. The sound of the engines begins to fade. The dark speck becomes smaller and smaller, a tiny, flickering ghost that finally vanishes into the pearl-gray heavens. The silence that follows is absolute. But instead of the howl of despair that might have greeted this departure weeks ago, there is only a long, collective exhale. The men in the ruins look at each other. They see the same weariness, the same soot-stained faces, the same steady, quiet eyes. Hans looks at his locket. Matthias looks at his half-potato. Karl looks at the gray sky where the cherry blossoms used to be. They are disappointed, yes. The hunger is still there, a hollow, persistent ache in the center of their chests. The cold is still there, a sharp, crystalline pressure against their bones. But they have found something else in the gray. They have found the strength of acceptance. They have realized that the salvation they were waiting for was not in the plains, but in the hands of the man sitting next to them. It was in the stories they told. It was in the half-potato shared in the dark. It was in the memory of the bees and the cherry blossoms. The heavens may be gray and silent, but the heart is not. It is a warm, vibrant thing that refuses to be quieted by the frost. As the short winter afternoon begins to fade into a deep, sapphire twilight, the men settle back into their shelters. They pull their blankets close. They listen to the wind. It is a soothing, rhythmic sound now, a lullaby that speaks of the endurance of the earth and the patience of the soul. They are not waiting for the sky to break anymore. They are simply living beneath it, 200,000 solitary lights in a city of ice. They close their eyes, letting the heavy, velvety darkness pull them into a dreamless sleep. They are at rest. They are whole. And as the first, tiny stars begin to prick through the thinning mist, the gray heavens seem to lean down, a gentle, motherly presence that cradles the weary city in its arms. Sleep now. The world is quiet. The sky is gray. But you are here, and you are loved. The morning will come, in its own time, with its own light. But for tonight, the acceptance is enough. The silence is enough. The shared breath of a comrade in the dark is more than enough. Light a single candle in a world of ice, and for a moment, the shadows are no longer your enemies. The night is deep, and the December air has become a physical weight, a crystalline pressure that settles into the marrow of the bone. In the heart of the great ruins, where the city of stone once thrived, there is now a silence so profound it feels as though the stars themselves have frozen in their tracks. The wind has fallen into a weary slumber, no longer howling through the jagged ribs of the factories, leaving only the sound of the earth breathing, a slow, rhythmic expansion of the frost as it claims another inch of the dark. Inside a small, vaulted cellar, tucked beneath the remains of what was once a quiet bakery, a handful of men are gathered. They do not look like the conquerors of empires or the defenders of a nation. In the blue, flickering half-light, they are simply tired souls, wrapped in every scrap of wool and canvas they possess. Their faces are maps of the months gone by, etched with the soot of the fires and the fine, gray dust of pulverized brick. Their hands, tucked deep into their sleeves, are cracked and stained, yet they move with a gentle, slow-motion grace as they huddle around a solitary center of gravity. A candle. It is a small, unremarkable thing, a stub of yellow wax rescued from the pocket of a long-lost greatcoat. But here, in the belly of the cauldron, it is the sun. Its flame is tiny, no larger than a teardrop, yet it casts a golden glow that softens the harsh lines of the broken concrete. It creates a small, warm sanctuary of light, a circle of humanity held together against an infinite and indifferent dark. For tonight is not like the other nights. Tonight, the calendar of the heart has reached a sacred threshold. It is Christmas Eve. Far to the west, beyond the iron ring and the vast, snow-blind steppe, there are homes where the windows are bright with the reflection of tinsel. There are kitchens that smell of roasted goose and cinnamon, and parlors where children are tucked into beds with clean, white sheets. The men in the cellar can see these places as clearly as if they were standing on their own front porches. They close their eyes, and the smell of the damp earth is replaced by the sharp, sweet scent of a fresh-cut fir tree. They hear the phantom chime of a village bell, muffled by the falling snow of a childhood memory. A young man named Stefan, whose eyes have seen more winters in the last few months than in all his 19 years, clears his throat. The sound is small, but in the heavy silence, it ripples like a stone dropped into a dark pond. He doesn't look at his comrades. He keeps his gaze fixed on the dancing flame of the candle. And then, he begins to sing. His voice is not a performer's voice. It is a whisper set to music, a fragile thread of melody that trembles in the freezing air. Still nacht, heilige Nacht. The words are old, worn smooth by generations of mothers and fathers. As the first notes drift into the corners of the cellar, the other men go perfectly still. It is as if the air itself has become a conductor for the sound. The melody is a bridge, stretching out across the ruins, crossing the frozen streets and the mounds of debris. Something miraculous begins to happen. Across the narrow, snowy alleyway, and a similar hollow beneath a shattered apartment block, another group of men is listening. These are men who speak a different tongue, who carry different photographs in their pockets, and who have spent the last week staring across the sights of their rifles at the very shadows Stefan occupies. But as the song reaches them, the iron in their hearts begins to thaw. They recognize the tune. It is the same lullaby their own mothers sang in the candlelit rooms of their youth. They do not shout. They do not stir. Instead, they allow their own voices to join the whisper. The words are different, the vowels are rounder and deeper, but the harmony is the same. The two languages meet in the middle of the frozen street, weaving together into a single, shimmering fabric of sound. Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright. For this 1 hour, a fragile, unspoken truce settles over the ruins like a blanket of fresh snow. It is not a treaty signed on paper, but a covenant of the spirit. The machinery of the world has paused. The hunger is still there, a hollow ache in the belly, and the cold is still there, a sharp needle in the skin. But for these minutes, the men are no longer defined by the colors of their uniforms or the borders on a map. They are just sons. They are just brothers. They are just fathers who want to go home. Around the solitary candle in Stefan's cellar, the men have pulled out their treasures. These are the small, sacred things they have managed to keep through the fire and the frost. One man holds a small, wooden carving of a horse, his thumb tracing the smooth curves of the mane. It was a gift for a son he has never seen, a child born while he was marching across the endless plains of the East. Another man unfolds a letter, the paper so thin it looks like a piece of the winter mist. The ink is faded, but he knows every word by heart. It is a letter from his sister, telling him about the new curtains she bought for the parlor and how the dog still waits by the gate for the sound of his boots. As the song continues, the first tears begin to fall. They are not the loud, jagged sobs of despair, but a quiet, rhythmic weeping. The tears trace clean paths through the soot on their cheeks, glittering like diamonds in the candlelight before they freeze into small, silver beads. They weep for the warmth of a woman's hand. They weep for the taste of hot coffee in a porcelain cup. They weep for the sheer, overwhelming beauty of a world that still knows how to sing. The weeping is a release, a way of letting the soul exhale. It is the sound of the heart finding its way back to itself after being lost in the smoke. In the shared vulnerability of the moment, a man reaches out and rests his hand on the shoulder of the comrade sitting next to him. It is a simple gesture, a silent communication of strength. I am here. You are not alone. We are remembering together. Out in the wider city, the cauldron has become a cathedral. The jagged walls of the tractor factory look like the arches of a Gothic church in the moonlight. The frozen Volga is a long, silver aisle leading toward the horizon. And everywhere, there are small, flickering lights, tiny fires and candle stubs hidden in the ruins, each one a small altar to the memory of home. In this landscape of ice, the carol acts as a healing balm. It doesn't change the reality of the situation. It doesn't bring the bread or the blankets. But it provides a different kind of sustenance. It reminds them that they belong to something larger than the struggle. It reminds them that there is a light that the darkness cannot comprehend, a light that lives in the quiet memories of a Christmas tree, the sound of a loved one's laughter, and the simple, profound peace of a silent night. The candle in the cellar has burned down to a tiny, translucent puddle of wax. The flame flickers, struggling to stay alive as the oxygen in the small space grows thin. Stefan reaches the final lines of the hymn, his voice dropping to a bare murmur, a sound that is almost indistinguishable from the wind. Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. The last note lingers in the air for a long, beautiful moment before it finally fades into the silence. The men across the street are quiet now, too. The truce holds, a shimmering, invisible thread stretched between the ruins. For a long time, no one moves. They sit in the dark, the warmth of the song still glowing in their chests. They feel a strange, hollow peace, as if they have been carried away to a distant shore and are only now slowly drifting back. A man named Friedrich reaches out and gently pinches the wick of the candle. The golden glow vanishes, replaced by a deep, velvety blue. The smell of the extinguished wick, a sharp, waxy scent, fills the cellar. They are in the dark again, but it is no longer a frightening dark. It is a holding dark, a dark that is shared with 1,000 other souls across the city. They settle into their sleeping places, curling up against the cold stone, their bodies overlapping to share the meager heat of their blood. They do not talk. There is nothing left to say. The carol has said it all. It has carried their letters to the wind, and it has brought the voices of their families into the ruins. As they drift toward sleep, the winter night continues its slow, majestic turn. The stars are so bright they seem to be singing their own celestial carol to the frozen earth. The frost continues its work, painting the ruins in a fresh layer of white lace. The city of Stalingrad, the cauldron of iron and fire, is for this one night a place of quiet reflection. In their dreams, the men are home. They are walking through the front door, the warmth of the stove hitting their faces like a blessing. They are hugging their wives, the smell of lavender and soap filling their senses. They are lifting their children into the air, their laughter ringing out like bells in the clear winter air. The carol in the cauldron has done its work. It has preserved a fragment of their humanity, tucked away like a seed beneath the frost, waiting for the spring. And as the moon sets over the Volga, a single, silver snowflake falls through the hole in the cellar roof, landing softly on Stefan's cheek. He doesn't wake. He only smiles in his sleep, a small, quiet smile of peace, while the silent night watches over the city, and the hearts of the weary find rest in the memory of the light. The cold does not arrive with a shout, but with a silver kiss that turns the breath into a ghost. In the deep, sapphire hours of January, the city of stone has become a city of glass. The frost has grown so thick and so heavy that it has transformed the jagged ruins into a landscape of shimmering marble, a world where every sharp edge has been softened by a layer of crystalline white. The sky is no longer gray or bruised, it is a vast, empty bowl of polished indigo, filled with stars that burn with a fierce, icy brilliance. They look like tiny diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth, watching over the silence with an indifferent, ancient peace. Up here, on the surface of the earth, the very air has become a solid thing. It is so cold that the wind no longer dares to howl. It only sighs, a low, rhythmic sound that carries the scent of frozen stone and the faint, metallic tang of the distant river. Everything is still. The machines of the city, the iron gears, the rusted conveyor belts, the hollowed-out tanks, have all surrendered to the ice. They are frozen in place, like statues in a museum of a forgotten age, draped in lace made of rime. But beneath the surface, in the cellars that have become sanctuaries and the dugouts that have become homes, a different kind of transformation is taking place. For months, the struggle has been defined by the noise, the thunder of the sky, and the shaking of the earth. But in this unimaginable cold, the struggle has changed its shape. It has moved inward. It is no longer about the maps or the buildings or the colors of the flags. It has become a quiet, internal journey, a slow conversation between the body and the spirit. The enemy is no longer the man in the opposite trench. The only enemy is the cold, and it is a foe that cannot be fought with iron. It can only be met with the warmth of the human heart. In a deep, earthen cellar beneath the ruins of a theater, a man named Mikhail sits very still. He is wrapped in a tattered woolen blanket, and over that, he has draped a heavy greatcoat that has seen too many winters. His hands are tucked deep into his sleeves, his chin resting on his chest. He is listening to the silence. It is a profound, heavy silence that seems to vibrate in his bones. Beside him, a young man named Luca is shivering. Luca is barely more than a boy, with eyes that still hold the reflection of the summer wheat fields he left behind so long ago. He is dreaming, his eyelids flickering in the dim light of a single, dying ember. In his dream, he is walking through a forest in the height of July. The sun is warm on his neck, and the air smells of pine needles and wild strawberries. He can hear the humming of a bumblebee, a low, golden sound that fills him with a sense of absolute safety. Mikhail watches the boy. He sees the way Luca's shoulders tremble, the way his breath rises in tiny, fragile puffs of white mist. Mikhail feels a sudden, overwhelming wave of tenderness, a quiet, fierce brotherhood that transcends the misery of the cellar. He knows that his own warmth is fading, a candle burning low in a vast and drafty room. But he also knows that he has a little left to give. With movements that are slow and deliberate, as if he is handling a precious piece of porcelain, Mikhail reaches out. He unwraps a portion of his own coat and shifts closer to the boy. He pulls Luca toward him, tucking the boy's head against his shoulder. He takes his own blanket, the one he has carried from the beginning, and spreads it carefully over Luca's legs, tucking the edges in to keep out the creeping chill of the damp earth. "Sleep now, little brother," Mikhail whispers, his voice a soft, melodic murmur that blends with the shadows. "The winter is just a story we tell ourselves. The summer is real. The sun is waiting just behind the hill. Dream of the strawberries. Dream of the light." As Luca feels the warmth of Mikhail's body, his shivering begins to slow. His breathing becomes deeper, more rhythmic. The forest in his dream grows brighter, the scent of the pine more vivid. He is no longer in a ruined city, he is home. This is the quiet fading of January. Throughout the ruins, in 1,000 hidden corners, this scene is being repeated. Men who were once strangers, men who were taught to see each other as shadows to be feared, are now leaning against one another for warmth. They are sharing their last blankets, their last scraps of dry bread, and the last, precious heat of their blood. It is a final, quiet brotherhood of the weary. In another dugout, a man named Emil is holding a letter. He cannot read it anymore, his fingers are too numb to unfold the paper, and the light is too dim for his tired eyes. But he doesn't need to see the words. He knows the feel of the paper, it is soft and worn, smelling faintly of the lavender his wife used to keep in her linen drawer. He holds it against his cheek, letting the memory of her voice act as a shield against the frost. Emil feels the white sleep beginning to beckon to him. It is not a frightening thing. It is a gentle, persistent calling, like the sound of a distant bell ringing across a frozen lake. It tells him that he has done enough. It tells him that it is okay to stop fighting the cold, to stop holding his breath, and to simply let go. It promises a world where the hunger is gone, where the iron is gone, and where the air is as warm as a summer afternoon in Bavaria. He looks at his friend, Peter, who is sitting across from him. Peter is already drifting, his head back against the earthen wall, a small, peaceful smile on his lips. Emil reaches out and takes Peter's hand. Their fingers interlock, rough, calloused, and freezing, but in that touch, there is a profound sense of completion. They are two travelers who have reached the end of a very long road, and they are choosing to sit down and rest together. "It's okay, Peter," Emil whispers, his eyes closing. "The stars are very bright tonight. Can you see them? They look like the lights on the Christmas tree. We're almost there. We're almost home." The struggle has been replaced by a serene acceptance. There is a strange, haunting beauty in this surrender. It is a return to a state of grace, a shedding of the roles and the ranks and the noise. In the deep dark of the city, they have found the most essential truth of their existence, that at the very end, we are all just children of the earth, seeking a soft place to lay our heads. The night moves on, a slow and majestic procession of shadows. The frost continues its work, spinning a web of silver over the cellars and the dugouts. It creates a shimmering shroud for the city, a blanket of white sorrow that hides the scars and the rubble. Beneath this blanket, the men sleep. They sleep with a quiet dignity, their bodies entwined, their hearts beating in a slow, fading unison. Imagine the city of Stalingrad as a giant cradle, rocked by the gentle hand of the winter wind. The ruins are the bars of the cradle, and the snow is the soft bedding. The stars are the nightlight, cast high above to keep away the dark. And in this cradle, the weary have finally found their rest. There is a moment, perhaps in the hour before the dawn, when the cold reaches its peak. The air becomes so thin and so pure that it feels like drinking light. In this moment, the last of the embers in the cellars go out, leaving only a faint, sweet smell of wood smoke. The men do not stir. They are deep in their dreams of summer. They are walking through the wheat fields, they are sitting at wooden tables with their families, they are laughing in the sun. The quiet fading is not an end, but a transition. It is the moment when the heavy, iron weight of the world is lifted, and the spirit is allowed to drift, as light as a snowflake, into the infinite blue of the morning. Mikhail feels the light. In his mind, he is standing on the banks of the Volga, but it is not the frozen river of January. It is the wide, blue river of his childhood. The water is sparkling in the sun, and a warm breeze is ruffling his hair. He sees his mother standing on the dock, her arms open, her face glowing with a joyous, radiant light. He begins to walk toward her, his feet light on the sand, his heart full of a peace he has not felt in years. He looks back one last time at the city of stone, now far behind him, fading into a shimmering mist. He sees the cellars and the dugouts, the ruins and the steel. And then, he turns toward the light. As the sun finally begins to rise over the eastern horizon, it paints the city in shades of rose and gold. The frost glitters like fire. The snow looks like a sea of pearls. The silence is absolute, a ringing, holy quiet that fills the empty streets. In the cellars, the brotherhood remains. They are still there, huddled together beneath their blankets and their coats, holding onto each other's warmth. They look like they are merely resting, waiting for the first bird to sing or the first bell to chime. They have found the peace that the world could not give them. They have survived the fire, they have endured the frost, and they have found their way home in the dark. The winter afternoon will come again, with its sapphire shadows and its singing wind. The stars will come again, watching over the ruins with their icy eyes. But for now, there is only the morning light and the profound, beautiful stillness of the weary at rest. The quiet fading is complete. The city sleeps, wrapped in its blanket of white, and the hearts that have found their peace are finally, eternally, warm. Sleep now. The world is quiet. The journey is over. You are safe, you are together, and you are whole. The morning has come, and with it, a light that will never go out. Silence, when it finally comes, is not the absence of sound, but a heavy, velvet weight that settles over the soul. For months, the world had been a scream. It was a jagged, metallic roar that never slept, a thunder that lived in the marrow of the bone and the roots of the teeth. The men had forgotten what the earth felt like when it wasn't trembling. They had forgotten the sound of their own thoughts, buried as they were beneath the endless rhythm of the falling sky. And then, in a moment so sudden it felt like a physical blow, the thunder simply ceased. It happened on a morning when the air was so cold it felt like shattered glass in the lungs. One moment, the horizon was a bruised purple of smoke and fire, and the next, there was only the pale, thin blue of a winter sky. The great noise vanished, leaving behind a silence that was almost painful. It was a ringing silence, a high, thin vibration in the ears that made the men tilt their heads, wondering if they had truly gone deaf, or if the world itself had simply run out of breath. Inside the deep, dark places, the cellars where the dust never settled, the tunnels where the damp earth smelled of old copper and wet wool, the men sat perfectly still. They did not move for a long time. They listened to the sound of their own hearts, which now seemed impossibly loud, like drums beating in an empty cathedral. They waited for the next crash, the next tremor, the next sign that the world was still ending. But the crash never came. There was only the soft, rhythmic sigh of the wind as it found its way through the cracks in the concrete. Slowly, with movements as hesitant as those of a creature emerging from a long hibernation, a man named Nikolai began to climb. His boots made a soft, crunching sound on the frozen debris, a sound that, only yesterday, would have been lost in the roar, but now seemed to echo across the entire city. He reached the top of the cellar stairs and pushed open the heavy wooden door, which was frosted over with a thick, white lace of rime. When he stepped out into the light, he had to shield his eyes. The world was blindingly bright, a landscape of pure, unblemished white. The snow had fallen during the final hours of the noise, and now it lay like a clean sheet over the wounds of the city. The jagged piles of brick, the twisted iron of the factories, the hollowed-out shells of the apartment blocks, they were all draped in a soft, glittering shroud. Nikolai stood there, a small, gray figure in a world of silver, and felt a strange, hollow peace. It was not the peace of victory, nor was it the peace of a journey ended. It was a hollowed-out feeling, as if the months of fire had burned away everything inside him, leaving only a quiet, empty space where the wind could blow through. He looked at his hands, which were stained with the gray dust of the ruins and the dark grease of his rifle. He realized, with a start that felt like a tiny electric shock, that he no longer needed to hold his breath. He could exhale, and the world would not fall apart. Other figures began to drift out from the shadows. They emerged from the ruins of the tractor factory, from the basements of the Red October, and from the deep dugouts along the banks of the river. They moved like ghosts, their shoulders slumped under the weight of their heavy, tattered coats. They were men from the west and men from the east, men who had spent the last half-year trying to erase one another from the earth. But now, in the ringing silence, they were just men. They were gray and thin, their faces carved with the lines of a hunger that went deeper than the belly. A man from the opposite side of the street, wearing a uniform the color of the evening mist, sat down on a fallen girder. He did not look for his rifle. He did not look for cover. He simply took off his woolen cap, letting the cold air touch his matted hair, and watched a single, lonely bird circle high above in the pale blue. Nikolai walked toward him. In any other hour, this would have been a walk through the valley of the shadow. But now, the air was different. The animosity had been replaced by a profound, shared exhaustion. When Nikolai reached the man, he didn't speak. He couldn't. His voice had been lost to the smoke and the shouting. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, bent cigarette, his last one, saved for a moment he never thought would come. He broke the cigarette in half and handed one piece to the stranger. The man looked up, his eyes wide and clouded with a weary light. He took the gift with fingers that trembled slightly, and for a moment, their hands touched. It was a brief, cold contact, but it carried the weight of 100 letters and 1,000 prayers. They sat together on the iron beam, two survivors in a landscape of rubble, sharing the thin, gray smoke as it rose into the motionless air. They were no longer enemies, they were just two souls who had outlived the storm. The silence allowed the city to speak in a way it hadn't in months. Nikolai could hear the ice on the Volga as it groaned and shifted, a deep, rhythmic creaking that sounded like the city was stretching its limbs. He could hear the soft shush of snow falling from a ruined balcony. He could hear the distant, melodic tinkling of glass shards dancing in the breeze. These were the small, beautiful sounds of a world coming back to its senses. He thought of the letters he had written in the dark, the words he had whispered into the earth when the ceiling was shaking. "I am still here," he had told his mother. "I am still here," he had told the wife who was waiting by a window in a village far to the east. Now, for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that those words might be true. He wasn't just a part of the fire anymore. He was a man standing in the light. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the snow in shades of soft apricot and lavender, the men began to move toward the river. It was a slow, quiet procession. There was no shouting of orders, no rhythmic marching of boots. It was a drifting of people, drawn by the ancient pull of the water. They stood along the high banks, looking down at the great Volga. The river was a solid, white road now, its currents hidden beneath the thick, blue ice. Across the water, on the far shore, the woods were dark and still, looking like a line of velvet against the sunset. Nikolai watched as a group of medics moved through the crowd, their movements gentle and unhurried. They were handing out mugs of hot, thin tea. When a mug was placed in Nikolai's hands, the warmth of the ceramic felt like a miracle. He held it close to his face, breathing in the steam, letting the heat thaw the ice in his spirit. Beside him, a boy no older than 17 was weeping. He wasn't crying out, there were just silent, steady tears tracing clean lines through the soot on his cheeks. He was looking at a small, wooden cross he had carved from a crate. He tucked it into a drift of snow, patted the white mound gently, and then stood up, wiping his eyes with a ragged sleeve. It was a quiet act of memory, a small anchor dropped into the vast, frozen sea of the city. The hollow peace settled deeper as the first stars began to prick through the twilight. The stars were so bright, so clear, that they looked like they had been polished by the wind. They didn't look down with judgment. They didn't look down with pity. They simply shone, as they had shone over the fields of wheat and the gardens of summer, before the world turned to stone. Nikolai felt a sudden, sharp pang of resilience. It was a small, green shoot of life pushing up through the permafrost of his heart. He realized that the city was not dead. It was broken, yes. It was scarred and blackened. But it was still here. He was still here. The man with the mist-colored uniform was still here. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a worn, salt-stained photograph of his family. He looked at the faces in the fading light, the daughter who would be taller now, the wife whose eyes held the same light as the evening star. He realized that the bridge back to them was no longer a dream made of smoke. It was a road made of snow and silence. He would have to walk it, step by step, across the vast and empty steppe, but the road was open. The thunder had ceased, and the gate was finally unlatched. The night deepened, and the cold grew sharp, but it was a clean cold, not the suffocating chill of the bunkers. The men began to seek out places to sleep, not to hide, but to rest. They curled up in the hushed shells of buildings, sharing blankets and the last of the tea. The silence remained, a protective canopy over the ruins. In the final hour of the day, Nikolai lay down on a bed of dry straw in a ruined library. Through a hole in the roof, he could see the Milky Way, a river of silver light flowing across the heavens. He listened to the quiet breathing of the men around him. It was a rhythmic, peaceful sound, a chorus of survivors. The months of the great noise were over. The fires were smoldering into ash. The city was a monument of ice and shadow, standing watch over the frozen river. Nikolai closed his eyes, and for the first time in a half-year, his sleep was not a flight from the thunder. It was a surrender to the peace. He dreamed of the spring. He didn't dream of flags or maps. He dreamed of the sound of the ice breaking on the Volga, a bright, chiming music that would signal the return of the world. He dreamed of the smell of wet earth and the first green leaves of the birch trees. He dreamed of a wooden door opening and a voice calling his name from a kitchen filled with the scent of warm bread. Outside, the snow continued to fall, a silent, rhythmic benediction over the broken city. The ringing in the ears had faded, replaced by the heartbeat of the earth. The thunder had ceased, the storm had passed, and in the profound, shivering quiet of the winter night, the city of Stalingrad began its long, slow dream of the morning. Sleep now, for the world is finally still. The sky is clear, the fire is out, and the silence is here to hold you. The morning will come, and with it, the long walk home. But for tonight, the peace is enough. The silence is everything. The river has a way of remembering the light, even after the longest and deepest sleep of ice. There comes a morning in late February when the air no longer bites with a sharp, metallic tooth. The sky, which had been a heavy shroud of unyielding gray for so many months, begins to soften at the edges, turning the color of a robin's egg. The sun, a pale and distant friend, finally begins to lean down with a touch that holds the faintest hint of a golden promise. It is a quiet, subtle shift, but to the world beneath the frost, it is the first breath of a new life. If you stand very still along the high, jagged banks of the Volga, you can hear it. It is not the roar of the fire or the thunder of the falling sky. It is a sound that has not been heard in this city for half a year. It is the music of the thaw. Beneath the thick, blue crystalline plates that have locked the river in silence, the water is beginning to stir. Deep in the dark currents, a rhythmic thrumming begins as the ice starts to shift and groan. Then comes the sound of 1,000 silver bells, the sharp, bright cracking of the surface. As the great sheets of ice pull apart, they grind against one another, creating a low, haunting song that echoes through the ruins of the city. It is a mournful and beautiful chorus, a long, slow sigh of relief from the heart of the earth itself. The river is waking up. The ice is moving toward the sea, carrying away the shadows of the winter. As the snow begins to recede, it leaves behind a landscape of soft, dark earth and glistening mud. The white blanket that hid the scars of the city for so long is pulled back, revealing the footprints of those who walked through the storm. Here, in the hollow of a ruined courtyard, is the imprint of a heavy boot. There, near a shattered doorway, is the delicate mark of a child's shoe. These are not just marks in the soil, they are the signatures of the human spirit, etched into the very foundation of the world. Walking through the city now, the air smells of wet brick, cold iron, and the deep, rich scent of the turning soil. It is an honest smell, a scent of beginnings. In the places where the fire was the hottest, where the stone was turned to powder and the iron was twisted like ribbon, a miracle is unfolding. From the dark, damp earth, between the cracks of a fallen girder and the shards of a broken window, a tiny shoot of green is pushing its way toward the light. It is a wild blade of grass, a small, defiant flame of life that refuses to be quieted by the memory of the cold. Near this blade of grass, a man named Lev kneels in the mud. He is no longer wearing the heavy wool of a soldier, he wears the simple, worn coat of a father. His hands, which have known the weight of the rifle and the chill of the bunker, are now gentle as they brush away the loose debris from a small, square patch of ground. He has returned to the place where his home once stood. The walls are gone, and the roof is a memory, but the earth is still his. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, tattered envelope. Inside are a few seeds, sunflower seeds, saved from a garden far to the east. He presses them into the soft, warming soil, one by one. As he works, he thinks of the letters he wrote during the dark months, the ones he trusted to the wind. He thinks of the men he shared his bread with in the cellars, the ones who sang carols in the dark, and the ones who wrapped their last blankets around the shivering shoulders of a comrade. The earth will hold you now, he whispers, his voice a soft, melodic murmur that carries on the breeze. The sun will find you. You can rest. He is not just planting flowers, he is planting memories. He is honoring the ghosts who sleep peacefully beneath the reborn earth. He knows that every stone in this city holds a fragment of a story, a shared cigarette, a whispered prayer, a letter to a mother, a moment of quiet resilience that the world never saw. He knows that the true history of the city is not written in the maps of the generals, but in the small, everyday heroics of the soul. As the sun climbs higher, the light catches something glittering in the mud. Lev reaches out and picks up a small, silver button, its surface etched with a pattern of oak leaves. It is a common thing, a tiny fragment of a life that passed through the ruins. He cleans it with the corner of his sleeve and holds it in his palm, feeling the warmth of the sun reflected in the metal. He wonders whose hand last touched this button. Was it a boy from the mountains of the west, dreaming of his sweetheart? Was it a man from the vast steppe, longing for the sound of his children's laughter? In this moment, the divisions of the past melt away like the river ice. In the eyes of the reborn earth, there were no sides, only people. There were only hearts that beat with the same fears and the same hopes, souls that sought the same warmth in the middle of a great and terrible winter. The silver button is a bridge, a tiny connection to a human story that will never be fully told, but will always be felt in the silence of the spring. The Volga is wide and blue now, a shimmering ribbon of light flowing steadily toward the horizon. The great plates of ice are gone, dissolved into the deep. The boatmen have returned to the water, their oars making a rhythmic, soothing splash as they cross from bank to bank. They no longer move as ghosts in the mist, they move as travelers in the light, carrying the tools of rebuilding and the bread of a new season. Throughout the city, the quiet fading has been replaced by this gentle returning. Figures move through the ruins, their voices no longer hushed in fear, but soft with the weight of remembrance and the promise of the future. They are gathering the fallen bricks, clearing the debris, and finding the small treasures that survived the fire, a chipped porcelain doll, a scorched book, a photograph of a wedding day. Each object is a victory. Each one is a testament to the fact that love is the only thing the winter could not break. The spirit of the city is like the river, it can be frozen, it can be hidden, it can be silenced for a time, but its current is eternal. It flows beneath the ice, waiting for the sun. It carries the weight of the past, but it always moves toward the morning. As evening begins to fall, the sapphire shadows stretch across the new grass. The stars begin to appear, but they no longer look like icy diamonds in a cold and indifferent sky. They look like the small, warm lights of a distant village, watching over the city with a gentle, protective gaze. The air is cool, but it carries the sweet, fresh scent of the river and the blooming willow trees. Lev stands and looks out over the landscape. He sees the city of stone beginning to rise again, not as a fortress, but as a home. He sees the footprints in the mud being filled with the shadows of new trees and the colors of new flowers. He feels a profound sense of peace, a quiet, humming contentment that settles into his bones like the warmth of a hearth. The ghosts are at rest. The soldiers who huddled in the frost, the mothers who sang in the cellars, the boatmen who slipped through the dark, they have all become a part of the soil, a part of the water, a part of the wind. Their resilience is the foundation of every new wall. Their kindness is the scent of every new blossom. Their love is the light that reflects off the surface of the Volga. The great struggle has passed into the archives of the stars. What remains is the enduring spirit of humanity, a spirit that knows how to find its way home through the dark, how to share a half loaf of bread in the cold, and how to plant a sunflower in the ruins. It is a spirit of quiet grace and unbreakable hope. Sleep now, for the world is finally whole. The ice has sung its song and departed. The earth has woken from its long and heavy dream. The city of Stalingrad is a garden of memory, a place where the light finds every corner and the shadows are soft and kind. You are safe. You are remembered. And as the moon rises over the quiet river, the footprints beneath the thaw are filled with the silver light of a peace that will never fade. The journey is complete. The morning has come. And in the silence of the reborn earth, the heart finds its eternal spring.